Franklin County Board of County Commissioners now in session for this Tuesday, October 17th, regular scheduled meeting. It's good to see everyone here this morning. We have a long agenda, so we're going to get started. If you would, please, let's rise for the invocation, pledge allegiance. Commissioner Ward, can you lead us, please?
Yes. Lord, we come to you today as we prepare to tackle this long agenda to conduct county business. We pray for everyone in the room. We pray for our fellow commissioners and everyone else in the community, Lord, that needs prayers and touched by your hand today, Lord. We pray in your holy name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any additions to the agenda this morning, Mr. Morrow?
Not from my end,
Okay.
Commissioner, unless any other commissioner has.
Okay. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as it's printed.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Sanders, a second by Commissioner Ward. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That's unanimous. Our first action item is the payment of county bills and approval of minutes from the October 3rd regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion to approve by Commissioner Ward, second by Commissioner Sanders. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Up next is public comments. Mr. Rowan, are any of these public comments on Zoom, or are they all here in the room? Do you know?
One is here in the room, the one filled out
Okay.
form, and the other is on.
Okay, so we'll start within the room first. Ms. Cindy Slater, please come forward, state your name for the record. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Cindy Slater. I live on Alligator Point, and specifically I live on Chip Morrison Drive. It's part of District 2, Mrs. Sanders' district. I'm here today because of an ongoing concern, and we feel it's a big one for our neighborhood and for the community, that the public access to the beach, the parking specifically, has been a dangerous situation for a long time. We'd like to see it removed, the parking. If you've ever driven on Chip Morrison Drive, there is a 90-degree turn, and it is, it's dangerous because cars come around that corner, and it's at the same time people are trying to walk across Chip Morrison to get to the beach. There's no signage for pedestrians. There's no signage for cars to slow down. I think the speed limit on Chip Morrison is 15 miles an hour, but there's no signage to tell them that. Numerous times I've witnessed families unload their car with their beach gear. They unload it and they're right on Chip Morrison Drive unloading as traffic is coming both directions, and the kids have to, get out of the street. The parents have to grab them. It's just very dangerous. Somebody is going to be hurt. I don't want it to be one of my grandchildren or one of my kids, but sometime it's going to happen because it's so dangerous the way the cars come flying around that corner. There is cars that are too long for the depth of the parking. So a lot of times when you're coming down that street, you have to move into the other lane to get around the cars. It's not deep enough for the cars that are parking there. And there's way too many cars trying to push in there. And on top of that, there's all the trash that they leave too, which it's usually up to the community to pick up the trash that they leave. But the most dangerous thing is the way the cars are parked. Some of them, they just don't care how they park. It's not clearly marked for parking spaces. It's just, trying to unload. There's not a walkway. I really want to see that parking access. I don't care about the beach access, leave that, but the parking needs to be removed. It's just too dangerous. And we've actually talked with a couple of people from the Sheriff's Department on their personal feelings about it, and they agree that it's a dangerous situation and somebody's going to be hurt. And with the influx of visitors that we've had over the last few years, and we've lived there for 7 years, we can see the increase every season, I should say, like, you know, when spring break starts all the way through Labor Day. The number of cars that we see on our road, it just keeps increasing. And I don't think it's gonna get any better unless that parking situation is taken care of. So that's my feeling on it. I know a lot of my neighbors feel the same way, and I'll tell you, at any one time on a holiday weekend or anytime there's a good weather, on our street alone, we'll have anywhere from 20 to 25 little kids, and these are little kids, 7 years and under. And they're trying to go to the beach, and we put out those neon signs. There's 4 of them that sit on our street telling people to slow down, that there's little kids in the neighborhood. A lot of them don't care. I've had one of them run one of them over, one of the signs over. So I just want it to be safe for our neighborhood. And on top of all that, I think it would be a big concern for the county as a liability issue, because it's a situation that the county has made with that parking, and I would think that the county at this point, they would be liable in addition to whoever else is involved in any kind of an accident or tragedy that happens there. And thank you very much, and I do want to commend the law enforcement department for, they monitor, they come down our road a lot. It's unfortunately, of course, they're not there when these people are going down our street 40 miles an hour. I've seen people drag race down our street. I've seen teenagers hanging off of cars going down our street. You know, there's not a whole lot we can do other than holler at them to slow down. So, but thank you for your time. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Slater.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'll address it from the commissioner's comments,
Okay,
because I know we're not supposed to address it now.
okay. Mr. Morone, I think the next one is actually attended by Zoom.
That's correct.
Ms. Mel Kelly.
She's unmuted, sir.
Is it time for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'm speaking regarding a broadening of the ordinance that you're going to be discussing later, but I'd like to make my point now. I respectfully request that you seriously consider extending the proposed tree clearing ordinance currently proposed for St. George Island into the entirety of the county. Too many county-wide lots are being clear-cut of late, and some along Highway 98 are truly tragic examples of that damaging handiwork. There is one west of the St. James Golf Course Complex, which is a horrible example, recently clear-cut into the wetlands down to the water's edge. I believe Commissioner Sanders can speak emphatically about that property. Others have been clear-cut also along Highway 98 between Carabel and East Point addresses. I suspect inland lots have also been clear-cut, but I don't regularly drive those roads. I do, however, have a good friend who is suffering flooding of theirs and their neighbors' single-story ground-level homes because of clear-cutting that was done north of their properties in Gulf Terrace. Such destruction must stop countywide, and only you can have that saving ordinance drawn up as soon as legally possible. I have witnessed Waterside and 98 North Side lots butchered of their soil-saving trees. Please consider making the drive yourself from Appalach to Summer Camp and see for yourself before there are no trees left on lots being clear-cut and emptied for development. Trees can and will help hold the land when nature sends storms. But please don't let the storms of development further denude our soils in Franklin County. We on the outskirts of St. George Island are equally important to the futures for all of us. In Carabel, we just lost several oaks of 100+ years to a callous commercial development. Please extend the proposed tree cutting ordinance to all of our county before it's too late. I hope it's not too late already. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate your respect to my comments. Best wishes to you all.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. All right. Up next, Sheriff's Office, Captain David Vaughn.
Good
Ms.
morning.
Ginger, I didn't see you sitting
That's
behind the
okay.
podium,
That's
sorry.
good. Ginger Coulter, Franklin County Sheriff's Office. Good morning to everyone. Just a quick update on the camera repair project that we were discussing last month. Our goal was to initiate and complete Phase 1 prior to September 30th, the end of the fiscal year. And we were on task for that. When they came, excuse me, when the installers came to complete the work, however, they called me out side to speak with me because the equipment that the company ordered was the wrong equipment. So they had to go back and revise the entire project. So the bad news is we didn't get it completed before September 30th. The good news, however, is with the new project, with the new equipment, the quote was revised from $27,845 to $16,014. So it actually wound up saving us $11,830 on Phase 1 of the project. I'm not sure if the equipment has made it in yet. Major Varnes could probably update you on where we are as far as the status of the ongoing project for Phase 1. But we were disappointed we didn't get it completed before September 30th, but that was beyond our control. And in the end, it's actually saving us some money. So I'm here to answer any questions, or Major Varnes if you have questions of him about the actual project.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So the Phase 1/Phase 2 is the way it was written up. That's something we already were trying to do, approved or whatever. Some of this other stuff that's written up for this morning has not been approved yet, but it's,
I believe that, are you referring to the lights?
yes, ma'am.
Yes, I believe Michael and Major Lawrence were discussing that. I believe I think the county as well are having to replace the lights for the same situation, but he knows more about that.
Okay.
He can answer that if you need to ask him a question
No,
about
no, that's
that.
fine.
Before the, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I was gonna say, before the captain answers, he told me there was actually change in what he sent. So where you have Phase 1 and 2, I have new Phase 1 and 2.
Yes.
Actually, that's gonna be new Phase 1. He's saying they prefer to
Yes.
use the old Phase 2 as Phase 2. So we have to change the labeling slightly, and I know it presents a little bit of confusion. So, and Captain Vaughn, you jump in, you tell me when I'm wrong here, so.
Well, what I was, yeah, because what I was trying to figure out, so the first one was $27,845. That was 1 and 2. And then the other one I'm looking at, Phase 1 is $16,000. But how much is Phase 2?
Phase 2 was the same. Phase 2 hasn't changed.
That was the error.
Phase 2 hasn't changed.
Okay, so,
It's just Phase 1. Phase
one.
1 went from $27,845 to $16,014.
let me look this up. That's, if anybody else has got questions, go ahead, but that's not what I'm looking at.
Yeah, because there's, like I said, there's some confusion there.
It's the second, first hyperlink.
Yeah.
Well, the first one says new proposal,
Proposal.
Phase 1 and 2.
Yeah,
And that's now Phase 1.
Okay.
that is just Phase 1.
It's just
That
Phase
was
1.
just Phase 1.
Okay, so
So you
it
have
didn't go down from 27 to 16, it went down from 27 and 21 to 16.
The project I'm looking at has $27,845.
That was the original one.
That was the Phase 1, correct. And the new proposal is $16,014.94.
Okay, what was the original Phase 2?
I do not have that with
21
me. 21,000.
And now they're being combined into one for 16.
No, sir.
No,
That's
no,
the
they're
confusion.
completely,
Okay.
they're completely separate, just,
Well,
That's,
All we look at is what's in front of us.
I know,
so-
that's the confusion.
Yes.
That's what the captain told me this morning.
That was my fault, Commissioner. I apologize, but we originally, when I talked to Redwire, I asked her to put one proposal out and get away with both phases. When I looked at it thoroughly, after I done talked to him, I realized it did not add the Phase 2 into the Phase 1 project. I was gonna go ahead because it was gonna save us money in the long run. What happened was, the system that they came to put in was incompatible with what we had. We have an older system, it would not work with that system. So what we're doing is we're taking the slower approach to it. We're gonna add some cameras to this, and it never got put into the Phase 1, so we had to continue with Phase 2 in this.
So is there a new proposal with Phase 2, or it's added into the 16,000?
No, we're gonna keep the old Phase 2 proposal, and
That's-
Phase 1 will be the one that we're here today about.
Yes.
Okay.
So if I had to rename it, Commissioner, which I will, for the public, especially when they get access to this. So where it says new Phase 1 and 2, that will now be new phase one.
Okay.
Phase two, which says old phase two, I'm gonna remove all and put new, because phase two stays the same.
Right.
Okay,
But-
so phase two will still be 2180?
Yes, sir, exactly. But you're not coming for phase two today. Today you just want phase one?
Phase
correct?
one to start
just
with
updating
phase
phase one.
one.
Yes, and the outside lights, which is a whole separate.
Correct.
thing we're gonna talk
The
about.
perimeter lights, I really need to get those done because we have a lot out.
That's the outside
And if we don't
lights.
get working on those, just for security reasons around there.
Well, okay, so, but the phase one, the original proposal was already approved, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
We're
now
just-
it's just less money.
Yes.
Yeah, we're just giving an
That's hard
update
to
on the
approve.
project is all.
We're saving
That'll
money
be hard to
here.
approve, less money, that'll be hard to approve.
A lot of people don't come to say, hey, we saving less money, but yes, sir, that's where we at.
But they do need approval if you're gonna allow them to change, if the county's gonna pay for changing the outside, the lights, outside.
How many lights is that, do you know? The outside lights?
I want to say there's 20 lights up. Now, don't quote me, it's somewhere between 10 and 20.
Oh, don't worry, we don't have to quote you, you're being quoted.
You're being recorded.
But, I mean, is it sufficient, I guess is the point I'm trying to ask.
Well, yes, sir.
Okay.
But
Yes, it's 59, 65, 75 is outside
Correct.
lights, correct?
that's
Yeah, the very
changed them all
bottom
to
outside light.
LEDs.
Yeah.
The issue is you can't get gas bulbs anymore. I guess
Oh, no.
it's like mercury vapor, and
Yeah.
they're outdated now.
Yeah.
So we have to go to LED, which will save the county money in the long run because
yeah.
you're adding the LEDs, which will operate at a cheaper cost. It's just we gotta pay to get it switched out, basically.
Right, well, no, definitely LEDs are cheaper in the long run. Last time I had to replace one of those gas bulbs behind CarQuest, it was $125, just for a bulb. So, yeah, and it's not cheaper.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so what we gotta approve today is the 16,000 and something, and then the 5,900, right? Is that what you need, Captain?
That's correct, Ms. Sanders. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Okay.
So,
I'll make a motion to approve.
And I'll second.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Sanders, second by Commissioner Ward. Any discussion?
So basically, we can get new lights and we're saving about $5,000.
Yes. The only thing I will add
That's a good trade-off.
is I hope that we, in the future, even these projects, that the purpose of us 2 or 3 years ago as a board, trying to say we want to look at capital expenditures, is so we can include them in the budget discussion in that process. That's the only thing I'll say for going forward. Not try to delay anything, not try to do anything, that
Yes.
don't need doing, but just to reemphasize. That's the approach we're trying to take. It doesn't matter if it's $1,000 or $100,000. We want to include it in that process.
Yeah, so what we could do is change the budget letter, and we'll talk to Aaron, she's next door listening,
Yeah.
to include, when you bring in your budget, include your capital
Yes.
expenses or projects
Yes.
as a separate item, but include them in the letter, so the
Yeah.
board is aware of it long before you get to the budget.
Yeah, and that's gonna help us too, Michael, with one of the things that's still kind of out there, but I hope to get to. We have so many different parts, and we talked last year in November about doing a strategic plan for the county. We have some of the parts, we just don't have it all in one place. We now have a website that shows where our projects are that we're doing and how they're being funded, whether they're grants or whether it's county dollars or taxpayer dollars, or a combination of several. We have different things out there, but we don't have it all together. But the only reason I'm emphasizing what I'm emphasizing is when we are able to put that strategic plan together, then the residents, the public's gonna be able to see, these are the improvements we're looking at making in the sheriff's department, and this department, and that department, and in every department, what we're trying to fund and, what we're moving towards. So that's the only reason I was mentioning.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, makes sense.
Any other discussion before we vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Anything else, Major?
No, sir.
All right.
Thank y'all, Commissioners.
All right. Ms. Jennifer Daniels, Emergency Management Director.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Let me grab my right paper, sorry. I have two action items. My first is I'm requesting the board's approval and retroacting of the chairman's signature on the 30-day extension of the emergency contract with the Summit Group. The date of the signature was 10/3 to keep, we were still trying to finish up scoring our RFPs so that we could award the actual final contract. And so that's awarding that as my next one.
Okay. Pleasure of the board.
So move.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Ward, second by Commissioner Sanders. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous.
My second action item is I'm requesting the board's approval of awarding the contract for RFP EM 2023-001, Emergency Planning Disaster Recovery and Mitigation Grant Program Services to the following. We took the top three that scored the highest. The first one was the Summit Group with 260 points. The second is Metric Consulting at 224. And the third is Elite Business Strategies at 220. And I hope to have the contract to our county attorney in the next week so I can present the actual contract to be signed at the next board meeting, if that works. We did have an email, I think you all got it, a complaint about one of our how someone scored. I will tell you, when we go out for bid with an RFP and we doing the scoring process, what we're doing, we have 3 different evaluators. We hand all 3 evaluators the exact same information, and we're asking them to give us an opinion of these bid packages. I stand by every one of my evaluators on how they score. This is their opinion of what they think and how they felt when they read these bid packages. And so again, I stand by every one of my evaluators. And would like to continue with my request to have the board award the contract.
Okay. Pleasure of the board. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Amison,
Second.
second by Commissioner Ward. Commissioners, do y'all have any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Griffin,
I do.
while you're here, Ms. Griffin.
Yeah, actually, the first 2 items on my report are actually relative to emergency management. So the first item, the county was very successful in this past legislative session thanks to the assistance of Senator Corey Simon and Representative Jason Chove, Capital City Consulting, and County Consultant Tracy Busby. The county has now received the attached grant agreement from the Florida Division of Emergency Management in the amount of $2,650,577 to go towards the construction of the new Emergency Operations Center. These funds, coupled with the $1 million congressional appropriation awarded in the prior year with assistance from Congressman Neil Dunn, and $1 million from Restore's Gulf Consortium, this will allow the county to begin construction on the new EOC. As construction is now funded, the county cannot afford to wait any longer for the FAA approval of the site at the airport. This month, the county is closing on 3 acres of land, which is not in a flood zone, on Highway 65 near the county jail, landfill, and road department. The possible Highway 65 location will eliminate the FAA from the process and will allow for the EOC to be constructed on the ground instead of having to be situated on pilings. Board action to approve and authorize the chairman to sign the attached DEM Emergency Operations Center grant. And item number 2, board action to approve site relocation to the 3-acre site in East Point and to proceed with construction and design activities.
So pleasure of the board on the first item.
So move.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Ward,
Second.
second by Commissioner Sanders. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Pleasure of the board on the second item.
Mr. Chairman, I'll motion to approve, but I've got some comments.
Okay.
So, essentially, there's pros and cons to this, and I spoke with Jennifer on the phone last night about this. If we do this, there's going to have to be some additional items that we're going to have to ensure that Jennifer and her department has, because I know at the old location we were talking about, she had storage that she thought she was going to be able to utilize, and found out that we weren't. So we're gonna have to ensure that if we put this and proceed with this, that we're gonna have to ensure that she has what she needs. In such, I personally, excuse me, would like to see a helicopter pad for our first responders, because the one we have right now currently is just, it's not the best. And in order to provide the safety and welfare of our citizens, we need to ensure that they have an adequate area where they can land a helicopter safely to get our citizens to the facility that they need for medical care. So as long as we look at this, and I don't want to approve it contingent upon, but I know that Jennifer has some things that she's going to have to need to be able to facilitate it being up Highway 65. I do think with the FAA option, it's too long. We got to have this. We got this money. We need to act on it now, especially the way prices are. FAA is requiring us to put it on stilts. It's going to require it to be handicap accessible, which is going to add to the cost. So I'm okay with this going up there as long as Jennifer and her staff is, and I believe they are. But we need to make sure that if we do this, that she's going to need additional square footage of a building for storage and some other items we need to make sure she gets. That's just me personally.
Yep, that's good. So we have a motion to approve.
It's gotta be on stilts.
The one at the
It
airport.
would be, yes,
This
sir.
will eliminate, putting it up 60.
That benchmark. That's the highest elevation.
That's a very long discussion.
And it was several feet up in
Yeah.
the air.
Yeah, we were,
Not 8 foot, it was several feet.
yep.
Yep.
And we should be able to save costs with construction by actually being able to put it on the ground, so.
All right, so we do have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Is that motion we contingent upon?
Nah,
No, but we're still gonna have to look at a site plan and all that, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think we.
No, it's just saying that where we're moving towards, sir, is
Okay.
the motion.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, we won't build without, Jennifer's.
So we have a
checking all the
second, we have a
boxes.
second from Commissioner Amison. I will say under discussion, I've had extensive conversations with Ms. Daniels about not just the sites that we're looking at, or have looked at in the past and considered, but the needs. So there needs to be an appropriate building and something that's not just the right size for now, but something's a little bit bigger so we have room to grow or add or do things. Because we're not just building for us, we're building for the future. It does need to have a helipad up there somewhere. I think there's plenty of room. It's 3 acres. And there does need to be an area for storage. There are other possibilities that we've discussed, but we'll see how they go over time. But I do think it's adequate space to meet those needs from my discussions with Ms. Daniels. Any other discussion from the board before we vote? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That's unanimous. Do you have anything else that's EOC related?
I do, actually. The amendment to the CDR-DR Generators Match Grant. In July of last year, the county approved the CDBG-DR Emergency Generators Match Grant. The original agreement was between the county and the state's Office of Economic Opportunity. This summer, the state changed the name of the Department of Commerce. The attached grant agreement reflects the change. And that's one thing with the Department of Economic Opportunity. Their processes have been very slow, and primarily because of this name change. They're having to redo every single agreement that they have out there at this time. So board action to approve and authorize the chairman to sign the attached amendment with the Florida Department of Commerce for the CDBG-DR grant.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Amison, second by Commissioner Sanders. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous, 4-0. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Anyone have anything for Ms. Daniels before she leaves? So we can't let you go without at least letting you think that we're gonna ask you something
I was
else.
waiting to say, I'll stay right here. I'm good.
Thank you, Jennifer, appreciate it.
Thank you. Y'all have a good one.
All right. Mr. Morone, it's on the agenda for Mr. Clint Davis. Is he here? Okay, I didn't see him come in. Mr. Davis, you're next. Florida Division of Forestry.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jared Cook, Forestry Supervisor, Tates Hill State Forest. With me, I have Clint Davis, Operations Administrator for Tates Hill. Tatesville and the Florida Forest Service is coming to you seeking Commissioner's approval for access for logging operations on McIntyre Road off of US Highway 319. With me, I have a map if you'd like reference to it.
It's coming. Just slide it and go there. That's all right.
If y'all notice, the area in yellow highlighted is what we're referencing. It is a roughly 2.5, 3 mile span of road on McIntyre that we're asking for access on. It is currently weight restricted. In the past, we have asked for access on this road in an emergency situation. We, at the time, had a southern pine beetle infestation, which we came to y'all then and asked for access, and it was granted. This time, we are coming in the area, if you'll see highlighted or outlined in orange, seeking to harvest that in that area. It is not currently infested with southern pine beetle. However, we are seeking to take preventative measures in thinning this timber out to prevent that from occurring. This past year alone, we have had over 100 acres in the area, specifically within a 10-mile radius of that area with infestations, and we're trying to alleviate that by whatever means possible, and that number one tool for us being thinning of this timber. It is currently a 29-year-old stand of timber. It is about 4 years past due for thinning before it starts going backwards in stand health, and we would like to take action to get it removed.
All right. Anyone have any questions, Commissioners?
I'm just gonna say that I talked to Mr. Davis about a month ago, and the first question I asked him, was it an infestation of pine beetles, because there's still a special permit, an emergency special permit that is active, and he said no. So I told him that I would refer him to the attorney, and that whatever the attorney recommended, that's what I would go with.
Okay. So what is that recommendation?
I spoke with, I know Mr. Davis, I know I spoke with the second person, but I don't remember. Was that you?
Yeah.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
They spoke with me about the request, as Commissioner Sanders has related to the board this morning. I read the ordinance, I reviewed the ordinance being the emergency ordinance that was passed, oh goodness, I think in the late 80s, I think that's when it was. And then there was an amendment to that based on an emergency amendment to that ordinance, which allowed the special use permit for the treatment and prevention of pine beetles. I think we actually had, what, the southern pine beetle was dealt with a couple of years ago. And I informed the commissioner, and I informed the gentleman from forestry that under the current ordinance, since they have informed me there is no infestation and that the thinning is not considered to be preventative to the southern pine beetle infestation, they didn't qualify under the current county ordinance, and therefore I could not recommend Mr. Morone to issue the special use permit authorized by the ordinance. So the ordinance says what it says, and they're going to undertake thinning operations, but my understanding from our prior conversation is that thinning was not considered to be preventative for the southern pine beetle. I mean, has that fact changed this morning?
That is incorrect, sir. Thinning is directly a preventative measure for preventing southern pine beetle infestation.
Okay.
Sorry if
well,
there was any
I wish I had
miscommunication
been
on the first part.
told that before, because I was not told that before. So, I mean, if the evidence this morning is that thinning is preventative to southern pine beetle, it's not considered treatment, I think that would qualify under the ordinance. But I have to say I'm a little,
But
I will not comment. But anyway, I'm hearing that for the first time this morning.
okay, so if it either does or doesn't qualify, there's no action need to be taken by the board?
if it qualifies under the treatment of southern pine beetles, then, and the prevention of southern pine beetles, and I think it qualifies for the special use permit under the amendment that was made to the ordinance a few years ago.
Right.
So,
But I'm just trying to make sure that is there anything we need to do or not?
no.
do?
I mean,
Okay.
based on what they're saying here this morning, no.
But now every other, if that is the case, every other part of that ordinance is still in effect.
Correct.
The way things were done with the road, the way between them and our county road department, correct?
Right, they have to maintain, I forget the details of the road maintenance, but there is a road maintenance requirement in the special use permit
Right.
at the expense of forestry or their subcontractors.
Okay,
Well, that's not what I was told. I was told they didn't wanna go
I'm
across
not
the
going there, Commissioner.
DEP wetlands, and so they wanted to use the county road, but like I said, I'm gonna go with whatever the attorney says.
all right, so, I guess they'll get with you after the meeting, sir? I mean,
I'll
what we,
get with whichever one of the, or both the gentlemen, and I'll get the special use permit drafted, and I'll get with Mr. Morone.
all right. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Davis? Or, I'm sorry, what's your name, sir?
Jared Cook.
Jared. I've just known Clint for a long time, sir, so that's an easy one, you know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Cook, do y'all have any questions for him? Thank you, gentlemen, we appreciate your time.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. John Kramer, FWC. Now, Mr. John, as you're coming, I noticed you have 2 items here. I thought we had about 10 on the agenda. No, I'm playing, come on.
That'll be for next meeting.
There you go.
That one
Can't
item
do it
could
all
be
at one
about
time,
10.
right?
No, I'm gonna turn it over to Devin in just a second while he gets set up. Again,
Okay.
John Kramer, Northwest Regional Director for
All right.
FWC. Devin's got an update on our restoration efforts in the Bay today. Have some good news as far as the award of our restoration project in the Bay. Actually came in under budget, so we're very happy about that. He'll give you some details on that as well. And also, I have David Telesco, our Assistant Section Leader for Bear Management, and Cheryl Spencer, who's our Regional Biologist for the Eastern Bear Management Unit. We'll be here to answer questions and talk about recent events with bear conflict.
Okay.
But I think we're fixing to get set up. I'm gonna let Devin go. He's a lot smarter than I am when it comes to oysters, so
There you go.
let him go for that.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
No worries. I don't have the presentation memorized, so I gotta.
What? Nobody tries to memorize the presentation, so I only put them in the slides.
Right.
So you don't have to memorize it. I will say this while we're waiting. A couple of weeks ago, when the bear issue started becoming a real stressing point for residents, and rightfully so, I remembered a conversation I'd had with one of our local contractors about a grant that was done in Seminole County, maybe a couple of years ago, that allowed Seminole County to actually purchase bear-resistant cans. And I think they then turned and sold them to their municipalities at a reduced cost, and all the money they took in was to buy replacement cans if they should get messed up. Anyway, they were trying to work out a way to get the most bang for their buck, if you will. So I reached out, having all of us commissioners up here, maybe Commissioner Amoson's new enough, he doesn't know him yet, but he will know him. Commissioner Lee Constantine from Seminole County, and I got a copy of that finally sent to me last night. And Mr. Morone will probably send it to the rest of you commissioners of what they did and how they, anyway, the ordinance they passed to be able to help alleviate and take care of the bear issue in their county. Sir, whenever you're ready. I was just filling in.
No worries, no worries. Make sure. All right, a little bit of delay. All right, good morning, Commissioners. So I know last time I was here, I think it was around December of last year, to give you guys a quick little update on our process. Like John mentioned, we do have quite a bit of meat on the bone for this presentation in regards to updates. So I'm just going to quickly go through our procurement process and those results for our upcoming restoration activity in the Bay. So quickly to give you a quick update on this project, it is just a hair over $20 million with NFWIF, or the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So if I do say NFWIF, that just means our funding partner. It is both Apalachicola Bay and Suwannee Sound are both a part of this program, although the oyster reef restoration is strictly here for Apalachicola Bay. In addition to the restoration activities that we have under this program, we're also developing revised oyster management plans for both fisheries. And it's important to stress multiple partnerships. We have multiple state universities, state management agencies, as well as it's important to stress the local stakeholders. We really want to make sure that they have a seat at the table for all processes of this program. So today, like I mentioned, I'm going to really be focusing here on the oyster reef restoration. So again, some updates that I think I provided at the last December meeting that I was at. We did have a contractor do extensive mapping throughout Apalachicola Bay, where they mapped approximately 2,000 acres of potential oyster habitat. Although most of that habitat did appear to be degraded to such a point that it would not support any type of oyster spat settlement. However, it wasn't all bad news. The east and central sides of the bay seem to be the primary areas for oysters within the bay, and likely represented the core of the oyster populations that we see to date. However, that mapping area, which I'll show throughout some slides throughout this presentation, did show where some of the restoration work that we do have budgeted would be most beneficial. And we were able to secure an additional $10 million from the governor's budget for this fiscal year that is exclusively for oyster reef restoration here in Apalachicola Bay. So we did talk to NFWIF about our restoration activities in the near future. And they requested that we perform a pilot study prior to the extensive restoration that we have for this bay. And it really boiled down to that a lot of the past operations for restoration that occurred in the bay, they didn't really hit their benchmarks that they were hoping for. So it ultimately boils down to that there's still a large number of unknowns still present on the best way moving forward for oyster reef restoration. So we have been working towards developing a large-scale pilot study. I know when people say pilot studies, you think very small, the size of driveways or something. That's not what we're doing. This is a large-scale pilot study. FSU, which I'm sure Dr. Brooke will be talking about shortly after me, they're conducting complementary studies. And ultimately, the work that we get, the data that we get from our folks here in East Point at our lab, coupled with FSU's results, are really going to help us to turn hopefully a lot of those unknowns into knowns to move forward with that large-scale restoration with the most scientific merit moving forward. So this is a map of some of the mapping area that our contractor did throughout Apalachicola. For our pilot study, we're really focusing in on this area. Like I mentioned just a few slides ago, this is really where we are seeing most of the oysters present in the bay today. So these are just a few small maps that really helped us start to digest a lot of the information that we were getting from both our researchers in East Point as well as the mapping folks. So starting in the upper left corner, that's just natural hard bottom, historical areas that we believe would be most beneficial for oyster reef restoration. Moving over to the upper right, that is side scan sonar data that the mapping contractor was able to basically just mow the lawn around some of that historical area to get a good idea of what the bottom profile looks like. We took a lot of that data to get bathymetric data to see different depths of this hard bottom. And then finally, our East Point folks, they went out, they went tonging, went diving to get a good idea of where present oysters are. So those little cross-hatched areas are areas where they went tonging and they found oysters. Those yellow dots, no oysters were found, but it was confirmed that it was hard bottom. So that really helped ground truth a lot of the data that we got from our contractor. So I took all of this data together and we started to develop target reefs for our pilot study, and we came up with these 24 sites. Each site, it looks very small, but it's 1 square acre. So again, this is a large scale pilot study. One thing, when I was taking a look at all those different data sets that I showed you on the previous slide, We really wanted to make sure that it hit all 5 of those characteristics. We obviously want hard bottom, we want good water flow, and we want nearby oysters. That's very important for oyster biology and ecology, is you want to restore areas right next door to those present oysters so that spat can really settle on that new fresh deployment area. And then obviously for logistical standpoints, we don't want it to be a navigational hazard, and we want it to be navigable for the contractor. So these sites right here hit all 5 of those marks. So something that while we were out in the water, we had some sunlight still, so we actually went above the areas on Peanut Ridge there that you can see by that circle, just to see if there was extra funding or more opportunities for additional restoration. We would already have some sites ready to go. So this is a very busy slide that really points out all of the facets of our pilot study. So we're going to be testing multiple reef heights. Reef height is certainly very important for oyster ecology. So we're going to be looking at low and high relief heights at 1 foot and 2 foot respectively. Some of the material that we're going to be using is that Kentucky blue limestone. We originally did not think that that was going to be possible just because we thought it would be cost prohibitive. I mean, it's all the way in Kentucky, but our contractor was able to secure that for a very nice price. And we know that this Kentucky blue has shown positive results previously here in the bay. We're not using large rock. So originally we were looking at using both small rock and large rock. The large rock could obviously not be tonged, so it wasn't very receptive to local stakeholders. That has been taken out. All the rock that we're going to be using is tongable by local stakeholders. Again, each restored reef will be about 1 acre in size. We are going to hire a site observer to watch all of the deployment opportunities. We're going to be mapping the reefs as soon as the contractor is done, with the contractor still on site. So if there's any issues with some of the reefs that they've done, they're still there to fix it while they're still here in the bay. NIFWIP has approved all of these revisions to our pilot study. And then again, like I mentioned previously, all the work that FSU is going to be doing with their studies just increases the scientific scope of what we're getting here in the bay and ultimately provides more data for future and larger restoration activities. So this is just kind of a quick flow chart of the adaptive management and the restoration plan that FWC sees here for the bay. So right now, this is where we're at. We're doing our pilot studies. We're starting those, we're signing contractors, getting material in the water, and getting some results from those. We'll ultimately come together, see what worked, what didn't work. The absolute worst case scenario when we're hitting the big red button is if nothing happens, if we're not seeing any oysters. At that point, we need to regroup with our funding partners, regroup with stakeholders. However, it's becoming more and more obvious that in future presentations, I can cut this out because we know we're going to see some good results here. But ultimately, we will take, FWC will take the good from both our study and FSU study and move into that large scale restoration. 2 things that will spin off of this. We'll have pros and cons for any future restoration activities. We'll have a good blueprint for how future restoration can occur with any type of future funding opportunities. And then obviously any results from this restoration study will help inform us on revising the management options for the local fishery. So in regards to fishery management, FWC continues to gather public feedback to help inform us on the best way to manage Apalachicola oysters. We've been talking with any organized entity within the areas to get what they like and what they don't like. It's certainly important, like I mentioned, to have local stakeholders here at the table with us. Our folks in East Point continue to monitor and analyze all the biological data. Some data kind of hot off the press is that most of the recent restoration efforts that have taken place here in the bay, they're really showing some good oysters. We were pleasantly surprised by seeing what we saw in the data. We actually had our folks triple check the numbers to make sure that they didn't have any rounding issues or errors in that. The areas are small, so I want to temper expectations. We're seeing good stuff. It's very small, and those areas are necessary to provide spat and really seed the restoration that's going to be happening soon. Ultimately, this is perfect timing for this restoration work. We're starting to see some beneficial oysters. They will provide spat for this large-scale pilot study. And then ultimately, the decisions on any future restoration and reopening of the bay will be informed by all the data that we are gathering, as well as include public comment. We are having internal meetings with FWC leadership to get different types of receptiveness to different management options. We will be bringing in the stakeholders to discuss those options. No decisions will be made behind closed doors without any input from local stakeholders. That is not going to happen. And then ultimately, we understand that we do need future funding once all of this funding does dry up. We are actively researching additional funding opportunities. One example is the NOAA Transformational Habitat Restoration and Coastal Resilience Grant. We're not looking to apply for this funding opportunity this cycle, but I have confirmed with NOAA that this is going to be a regular funding opportunity. So we'll gather a lot of data, what worked, what didn't work with what we have now, that will directly help us submit a competitive proposal for any future restoration funding opportunities. And then we're also looking for recurring state funding as well. So to conclude, we do have, through this project with NIFWIF, approximately $20 million for gathering preliminary data and analyses we've already done, obviously the restoration efforts here in Appalach, and then creating stakeholder-informed, regionally specific oyster fishery management plans. And then again, I want to highlight that $10 million that was allocated from the state for reef restoration here in Appalach. The restoration pilot study, again, is underway. We do have a contractor. We are working with them on providing them all those GPS points of those red restoration reefs that I showed you. We're talking with FWRI, our researchers, to see if we can get additional restoration with this contractor. Where else could we get that work done? The material in the bay is going to be put in the spring. So we really hope to get it this calendar year. We talked with our researchers. We weren't able to get 100% of the material in this year. The researchers, which they're doctorates, PhDs, are a lot smarter than I am about oysters. They said all of it needs to go in at the same time. If you can't get it all in the winter or in the fall, you have to get it all in the spring. We've already talked with our contractor. We're looking at a late February to early March start date. And for ride-along opportunities, that kind of ties right in with that. I know there has been some talk on some commissioners potentially being interested in coming out to a ride-along. For this calendar year, our researchers are out surveying and monitoring, so if you guys want to take a look at the methodology that they use, we can certainly get you guys on a law enforcement boat, pull right up next to our divers to get a really good idea of the work that they're doing. And then early next calendar year, you're more than welcome to come out to watch some of those deployment operations. I know for one, I'm going to be making down the trip from Tallahassee as often as I can to observe those deployment operations. So we can certainly keep you guys informed of those opportunities. And then again, I always just like to end all my presentations for oysters is that Apalachicola Bay oyster restoration. The success of that is really dependent on the culmination of work from us, the management entities, from the university researchers doing their work, but also from the local stakeholders. If we're all able to come together, we may not all agree on all of the points, but as long as everyone's voices are heard and taken into account, I think we are setting ourselves up for success for both the restoration and the fishery here in Appalach. So if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to entertain them.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'd add me to the list for a ride-along, because I would like to see what you guys are doing out there.
Absolutely.
And the potential restoration of our bay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you've got my number?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. And I've already talked with our researchers to kind of let them know, and they said absolutely. We'll get with Charlie Wood, with law enforcement, to get a boat out there. We don't want to cause any issues with their work, the researchers, but we can pull right up next to them, and we can really show you guys what we're doing. Because it's important, you guys see the data, but I think it's important to show how we get those data, and I'm more than happy to take you guys out.
Anyone else, Commissioners? Yes, sir.
I was gonna let us,
No,
he's
you're not
the
gonna
expert.
save me the last, I mean.
He's batting cleanup today, is what he said.
Well, I'm glad to see that you're gonna have a vendor for the Kentucky Blue, because I found out, through, the doctor and everything, that the Kentucky Blue works the best. Cause the fossilized shell that we have in this area goes to muck.
Correct.
So that's not good, because that smothers the oysters
Mhm.
down there. The other thing is, I'm glad you're looking at additional funding, because once this bay is open again, you're gonna have to have that reoccurring shelling and stuff like that. So this is a state entity out here in the water. This is state waters, so, you know, we've been told we didn't have no jurisdiction over it, so. But I'm glad to see that, and I, for one, anything I can do to help push it forward,
Yes,
please
ma'am.
let me know, because it is very important that we get this bay open back up,
Mhm.
but preserve it in a way that will last for generations.
Exactly.
And it has lasted for generations until now. So now it's got to have a little bit of TLC
Mhm.
in it. But the bay is still a viable bay, and it needs to be worked on. And that's where I come from on it. So, and as far as a ride along, I don't trust nobody out there on that bay. I'm telling you, I do not. So y'all just inform me, take pictures.
We'll take photos.
Or whatever. I don't go out there no more. No. And but anyway, thank you for all you do. And I want to look at timeline. Do you think you all are going to be on a timeline for the year 25 or 2025? Do you think you're going to be there?
Yeah, so we've been having those meetings. I mean, we're going high up in leadership to let them know the good and the bad. And so far, I mean, I'm pretty low on the FWC food chain. But from everything I've heard, there's been no talks on, hey, we may need to extend this.
That's what I think.
So there's been nothing that's been talked about with that. But again, it'll be informed by the data. All we can do is provide what we see to the FWC commissioners. They ultimately make the call. But we will provide them the good, the bad, the full picture, and help inform them as much as possible.
Well, Devin, in your intelligence, tell us, do you believe that the bay is recovering little by little?
So I think for this, I'm more of a pessimist, it seems like, for some reason with this bay, and I'm seeing good results. When I got an email saying, hey, we're seeing some good stuff, I called them and said, can you double and triple check those numbers before I get happy, because it's a Friday and I don't want to think this is happening and then come Monday. And they said, no, we triple check the numbers. Things are looking good, and so we're excited. We're cautiously excited about it. We still want to see some more results. It's not ready to go out and fish it, but we are seeing results that will directly tie into this restoration to hopefully snowball the beneficial results.
Well, especially with this cold weather moving through, it makes you want to go out there and hog those oysters, but you can't. So, I mean, there's things that we like to do on that bay with the oysters and stuff. So, anyway, thank you for your time, and John, thank you too. Appreciate that.
Mr. Driscoll, I think I heard you say earlier in your presentation that you guys have decided you're not going to use the larger rocks because they can't be tongued. Is that correct?
So it was partially that. It was also cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
That large rock, especially coming from Kentucky, you got to think fuel cost, everything. So yeah, it was half logistical, half stakeholder informed. But as soon as we did find out, like, we're really going to be, it's going to be tight to use that large rock, we just decided, it'll save us money to get more restoration, and it'll be better received from stakeholders. So I saw it as a win-win.
Yeah, well, because that was the thing that some of the local people like myself thought when we were looking at it originally with the size of some of those rocks. I mean, I'd done that for about 3 years, so I decided I wanted to get off the water because I foresaw some of the things we're dealing with today. Growing up in the industry, my parents had a oyster shucking house and a retail market, and that was what we did with seafood. But yeah, you talk about a lot of stress when you get really big material.
Yeah.
That you catching some tongue heads, it can be pretty tough.
Yeah.
Not that it can't be done, it just makes it more difficult. The other thing I noticed, and I'm not trying to tag you with anything, when you were talking about the Kentucky Blue rock, you said that's some of what we're going to use. Or
Oh, so
that's majority of what we're
No,
doing?
that was just,
Okay.
yeah, sorry, I got caught up on my words.
Well, I
Yeah.
was listening,
No, no.
so I was like, well, what else are we using
No,
then?
that is what we're using,
Yeah.
yeah. So we worked with the director of the Florida Geological Survey to get a good idea, because again, we thought Kentucky Blue was going to be too cost prohibitive.
Right.
So we did open it up. There was an Alabama gray limestone
Yes.
that I guess Alabama and I think Mississippi have been using. They've been seeing good results. And there's also, it's called Florida Dolostone, which is found in the Panhandle and kind of Gainesville north. So we allowed any three of those because the Florida Geological Survey director said they're all going to act the same in the bay. They're not going to mud it up. It's not going to break apart. All three of those will be used. But the contractor that we have picked, they are using the Kentucky Blue. And if there are any changes where he says, actually, we're going to switch to the Alabama Gray or something, I'll certainly let you guys know. But all points have been, or all communication with the contractor has pointed towards that Kentucky Blue.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, I know that there's, in the industry, I know that the thing that I worry about, and I don't know if that ship's already sailed or not, the longer we stay, and this is just the way I feel about it, the longer we stay with that bay closed, the more difficult it is going to be to sustain a brand that was built in this local area. You know, that's a big concern. I mean, you talk to anybody that does marketing for a living or anything to do with trying to put their name out there, a brand is pretty important, and what it's built on is even more important. And the longer that bay stays closed, the more difficult it is going to be to establish that brand. I do think that there's some other things, I don't know what's been discussed with local partners, and I am just a local resident. I wouldn't consider myself a local partner. I'm not in the industry anymore. But some of the things we will have to look at going forward is how we're going to address when we do get the bay back open. I know that talking to some of the local guys that do still shuck oysters, that they are required, if they buy theirs from Louisiana or Texas, they have to take their shells back to them. Well, our shells need to stay here too.
Yeah.
And however that needs to happen, we need to find a way to make that happen as well. Because that's one of the things that's happened over time. We had an abundance of shell, we did, but most of it wound up in driveways or roadways, or, you know what I mean?
Yep,
And it
absolutely.
didn't go back into the bay.
And that has
So,
been talked about, yes.
Yeah, and, you know, but we can't go back, but we need to make sure going forward that we help fix it. I guess is the only reason I bring it up.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I can remember back when I'm in agreement with you about the oyster shells, that they need to stay in the bay. They do. Whatever bay they come out of, need to go back to. But I can remember back in '85 when Hurricane Elena come and just wiped the whole industry out. You saw all those barges coming from wherever, Louisiana, whatever, and it took a long time for us to get back to where we were before the storm hit in '85. So we don't want that to happen again. And I believe if you restore the bay, every time you dump a thing of empty, you know, shut down oyster shells, every time you dump them over, they're gonna make an oyster. So
They're
you
gonna
dump them in the
definitely
right place.
Definitely, and that's one of the other things, the only thing that is kind of apprehensive to me about the process we're going in right now. We've been there before. Kate and Elena had wiped this bay out. We've been there. But one of the consistent things we had, even though it was bad, and those were some of the years I was out, that was what I was doing, was oystering. 1 or 2 bags a day, you're doing good. You're doing real good. You've worked all day long to find those oysters.
Yeah.
And catch them and get them, you know, and sell them. But one of the consistent things that happened then that's not happening now is oysters have to be worked and moved. When you get a bar that's vibrant and healthy, and people are out there oystering it, and they say, "My God, there's 200 boats on that one bar." Well, some of that has to do with the fact that everything else is closed, and the state's saying everybody's got to go to this spot. You know, some of that's what's happening, but the rest of it is that area as it's worked, especially I know on Cap Point, the more you work it, the more that bar extends as it's being worked, as it's healthy. But if you can put all the material you want to in the bay, if it's never turned over and never moved, you may or may not restore the bay. it's got to be worked. It's got to be moved in some fashion. How that works in the current plan with it being closed, I don't know. But like, for instance, the stuff I believe north of the Apalachicola Bridge is still a closed area. Leave it closed long enough, don't touch it, you'll never have to worry about it be mud. Do what you want to. It will not stay oysters there. They will eventually die off. It'll eventually, the material, the area will change. But if you work it, it'll stay a good hard bottom of bar. Things will move out. That's just the way it is. It's just like farming peanuts in Georgia. You got to work the land.
Absolutely.
That's part of it.
And we're really talking with, when we do meet with FWC leadership, bring in our researchers, we talk about every different facet of the management, you know, culling, making sure it's culled on site to keep that material there. This material that we're deploying effectively builds those reefs back up,
That's right.
and which is extremely important for here in Apalachicola Bay. So, yeah, and again, I don't want to steal too much thunder from Dr. Brooke on some of her studies, but we are looking at the results from their studies to help tie in for that future large scale, the extensive restoration to again, put us in the best scenario possible. When we reopen the bay, we do it beneficial for the oystermen, but also for the oysters long term to make sure, you know, we're not back here in the same spot 5 or 10 years from now.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, I got something. Devin, you mentioned that with the studies, you are having active meetings with our community and such. Are you involving our local fishermen and women that used to work the bay, that know it like the back of their hand, that you're getting, you know, belts and ideas off of them? Because let's face it, they've worked these waters for many, many years. They're very knowledgeable about it. Do you guys incorporate their ideas as well and get their input in terms of how to restore the bay appropriately?
Yeah, so that will be speeding up over the next 6 months or so. A lot of my focus has just been getting a contractor signed pen to paper so we can get some restoration going. A lot of the work that FWC has been doing is through the FSU APSI work, where they're pulling in a lot of stakeholders. And there's also the Seafood Work and Watermen's Association. Whenever there's an outreach event that FSU holds, FWC is kind of, we're separated, but we're under the same physical roof at the outreach event, where I do talk to some individuals from that entity as well. It's pretty small work right now. FWC's purpose, again, not stealing too much from FSU's presentation, but their deliverable that they're providing to us. It's a very large document. It's called a management plan, but it's mainly a suite of management recommendations and their receptiveness by local stakeholders. I think that is going to be a good springboard for FWC to use when we do have more formal events with local stakeholders to really talk about. Some of these have already been vetted by some stakeholders. Now we want to open it up to a larger group. Option A. What do you guys feel about option B? So a lot of those discussions are still pretty preliminary, but you know, the end of 2025, 2026, when we're set to reopen, is quickly approaching. So we are certainly going to beef up our stakeholder engagement over the next 6 months or so.
Take a seat, no, I'm playing. My first question, and they've hit on a lot of stuff that I was gonna ask, obviously, I wanted to get it all out so we wouldn't sit here circling around. But, the latest studies on the material that ABSI put out this last round, that had the concrete, we had different material. My concern, got me now?
Yep.
I speak pretty loud anyway, but, my thing is, and I love the fact that we got the Kentucky Blue, and I believe a lot of the local organizations will be happy about that, because that has, as far as I know, has proved to be the best material. The only issue going forward, and this is the crystal ball coming out, y'all were speaking about management issues as far as shelling material. Y'all got to realize that we don't shuck very much Apalachicola oysters, so getting Apalachicola shells back is probably going to be an issue in the future, especially if the other states start implementing more, bring our shells home, so to speak. Is it open in this restoration, the moving forward, that if we have to shift material, the type of material, and say shift from Kentucky Blue to say like the concrete. If that comes back, chips of concrete, that's a cheap material. I'm just wondering, is there room there to do a shift with the material going forward, or is it just going to be set in stone? This is the stone we're using.
No.
You know what I'm saying? Is that
Right. So again, with that flow chart that I had when we had those pilot studies, and then when we get together and talk about what's worked, if we determine that, let's say concrete works just as well as Kentucky Blue and it's a quarter of the price, well, of course we're going to utilize that work or that material for our large scale restoration. So the $10 million that we have from the state, 100% of it is going towards this pilot study. But we still have quite a few $1 million from this NIFWIF project, which we will learn from our pilot study, from FSU studies, and then transition into the large scale restoration. So nothing that is being done with our pilot study is 100% going to happen in the large scale. We'll certainly take the good, leave the bad, and move forward with all the good stuff for the large scale restoration.
okay? Now, since we're on the pilot study, as far as your pilot study, like you said, is going to be a much bigger area. Do you have some type of comparison about what's been done, say with the DEP area that had the Kentucky Blue, other areas that ABSI's done, or other organizations or whatnot? Are you going to be like 75% larger? And I'll tell you why. Because I've been pretty outspoken about this. We just need the material out there. And the more material we get out there, obviously we're going to get more oyster. You can throw a boot out there and grow an oyster on it right now.
Absolutely.
It has been that way. And hopefully, knock on wood, it'll continue to be that type of spat production moving forward in the next few years, especially with the restoration. But I'm curious about what size in comparison to what's already been done. Once your study goes in, are you going to be, if it's a pie, they've got a quarter of it, and you guys are going to be,
Yeah, so I don't have specifics. I can certainly get with our East Point lab and get with Dr. Brooke from FSU to get a good idea of what's been done over the last 10 years or so. And again, what piece of the pie is this going to be doing? I can say it's big in both terms of spatially X and Y, so we're much larger than some of the stuff, but we're also the relief. Like I mentioned, this is 1 feet and 2 feet. Some of the other projects were inches of material. So in the terms of total material going in, we are a lot larger. Even when we were having some of our discussions with potential contractors in the bidding process, they said, you said how many tons you guys were looking for. Were you guys right on that? That is so much bigger than any work that's ever been done, because again, we may not be the largest footprint through X and Y, but when you take in that the amount of relief as well, this is going to be a very, very large. So that's why we say large scale pilot study, because when you think of pilot study, you think of very small, but this one is going to be quite large.
Okay, now I'm going to jump up to, again, talking about, you just kind of touched on management moving forward. That's not a discussion for right now. But it has been our experience, especially with FWC, and I hate throwing you under this, but, and I'll just be real brief, like with the Bog Sawyer management area. We were told, hey, we want to hear public comment. When we got there, they flipped this is before they flipped a big piece of paper and said, this is what we're going to do. That's not public comment. That's just basically telling you, hey, this is what we're doing. With this, I would really like to have as much comment or discussion with this, because, there's a lot of great ideas, and we have seen management plans that's worked in the past that the state's implemented, then withdrew, for whatever reason, dissolving. We all know the history of that, the DNR and everything. But that was a really good management plan, and I think we need to have this open dialogue on moving forward on where we're at bag limits. I hate to use this word, and I'll fight it till I don't breathe anymore, but limited entry, it's like the devil. But anyway, I just want to make sure that we keep reiterating that management, I feel like we need to be a part of that discussion.
Absolutely, yeah. And both my division, I'm the Division of Marine Fisheries Management, my leadership is always, we want to get public comment. We want to make sure that there's no curveballs when we bring it up to the commission, where you get 30 or so people in the audience that go, well, we have no say in this. We don't like that. We want option B rather than option A. That can completely derail our process. So we certainly want to make sure that stakeholders both informed and hopefully in agreement with what we move forward with. But also, and I know John could also attest to this, our executive director and that office also wants to make sure that we have public comment, and they are informed on what we're looking at, what's on the table, what's off the table moving forward. So I think that is going to be a key part in developing the revised fishery management plan for Appalachia oysters.
All right, the last thing I'm gonna hit you with, and this one's gonna hurt, but the time frame.
Mm-hmm.
My math is not your math. I mean, we're in 2023 now. We're talking about getting the spring of this pilot study in the spring of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when are we talking about doing a full-scale restoration? I mean, what's the time frame from the pilot study to once we say, okay, we're banging, let's put some stuff out?
Yeah, so.
Because that kind of tends to run on into 25, so I don't, you know.
Right. Yeah, so our researchers have said that they would like to get about 12 months worth of data off of these pilot studies. So that brings you into early 2025. So that gives you, 10 months or so to get the large-scale restoration. Again, we don't, I can't comment because I don't have a comment on how the bay is going to be reopened. But potentially, if we do that large-scale restoration in spring of 25, if it's not completely ready to be open come 2026, maybe those reefs are, not opened in 2026. Everything is still going to be on the table, public, stakeholder informed, but again, we are coming up quickly to 2026. We want to make sure that the worst case scenario is to extend that closure, which again is not being discussed right now, has not been brought up in any communications that I've had. But we want to make sure that it's, again, open for the oysters and for the fishery in the long term. So I agree the timeline is a little worrisome, but we are moving forward as best as we can.
So, and I hate going down these rabbit holes. I'm not a time frame person. I was, from the very beginning, it shouldn't have been a 5-year time frame because you just gave people a time and a date, and that's what people want to see. And then you got variables that you can't control in between there. But since y'all ran down, and I say that collectively, I'm not,
Sure.
Since we went in that direction together, I'll run down the hole with you right quick. Going back to 85, 86 restoration, I think we were like 14 months from the restoration, the complete restoration, to when they reopened. That's actually pretty quick because the material got out there. Once the material's there, it recovered. The size of what the bars and stuff. We've had this discussion, me and John. It's deteriorated over years. It's a different situation. But with that being said, I'm just more or less, I'm not worried about the size. I'm just worried about, or having a discussion about the growth of the oysters, how rapid it would happen once we get a full-scale restoration. So if you're talking pilot study, spring of next year, 24, we wait, that's a 12-month wait, and we'll get the information back in from that. Then is the plan to do a total restoration in the spring moving forward of 2025. Now we're gonna have to wait another year before we have growth and potentially open. So that's why I'm concerned. That's why I'm asking the questions about the time frame. And again, that's why I'm not a time frame kind of guy, because you're putting a label, you put the time, and that's what everybody's hopes and dreams hinge on. And when it don't go that way, well, here we are.
Yeah, and certainly we are going to be pushing our researchers to get out in the water as much as possible to get data off of those pilot study reefs. They can, and again, I'm just throwing random numbers out there, but after 6 months, if they're out there looking at these pilot study reefs, which would be, end of summer, fall of next year, and they go, we're seeing amazing results here. Like, everything is looking good. Potentially we could speed up that process, but it has to be data informed, because we're kind of, with this large scale restoration, putting all of our eggs into the basket from what we've learned from the pilot study. I would hate to, speed up the process, go, yeah, let's go with that as we did, and then it end up not working as well as we had hoped. So we got to see what the data says, but if we can certainly speed that process up, we will.
Any other
I appreciate it, Evan. Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right. Thank you, Mr. Resco. Mr. Kramer, we did not let you off the hook, sir.
No, I appreciate that. And just to add on to those comments at the end, that I think the key word going forward, restoration is always going to be part of that bay going forward.
Yep.
Given the current condition that it's in, that's going to be a topic that will always be part of the bay going forward. What will be coming into play when we start talking about opening the bay back up is what's sustainable. Again, restoration activities will go on probably for the rest of my lifetime in that bay. But again, what's sustainable for the fishery? So that's a conversation, and that's the key focus we have going forward. What can we sustain as far as fishery activity? And we want to get there.
Careful now.
I know.
That's going to require funding, and that's probably going to come from the state. And
Well, we will do our
the
best to get as
political
much
winds
as
blow.
possible.
So,
Right. All right, well, listen, I do have David Telesco here to kind of back me up on some of the bear management data. I know we've had some conflict issues in the past few weeks here in Franklin County, a few months for that fact. We've been in conversation with the sheriff about what activities we're doing to try to control that issue. I think the key thing that we found in discussing with the sheriff is increased sharing of information on what we're doing in coordination. Again, we do have bear activities in the county, just like we do in Navarre, Wakulla. If you've watched Facebook down in Naples, you saw one on a sailboat. So they're all throughout the state. And the bear activity is a direct product of the conservation success. We went from a couple hundred bears back in the 70s to, I think, well over 4,000 now with the current population. We're actually going through a census right now, working from the south up. Again, the key thing we need from the community, and this we talked about it with the sheriff, and he hit it on some of his Facebook posts. I know there is some frustration when people call in that they're dealing with these activities on their property, but we need that information where we can develop a better response plan and management tool for those animals going forward. Again, I said it before, and I think if you remember back, Chairman, others that were here in July of 2022, we want bears living in the woods. We don't want them living in town. That being said, I just want to caveat, if we had every trash can that was bear-proof, every commercial dumpster bear-proof, bears are part of the landscape. They're going to be here. Even if we had the management tool recommended in 2019, a hunt, they're going to be in the communities. Again, we want to work with communities to get those conflict bears out. But again, I think part of the issue that we've had is that increased information and coordination with local stakeholders, the sheriff's department, and others. But I'll stop there. And again, we've all heard the conversations over the last few weeks.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing issue. There's not a silver bullet, there's not a decision, there's not action we can take today or tomorrow that's going to solve this issue. Is trying to work through that. But I'll stop there, and like I said, David's here, Cheryl as well, try to field any of your questions.
Mr.
And I'll
Chairman,
ask you to please back me up.
before John leaves, I want to hear the bear thing first, but before John leaves, I'm going to ask him a question, get him back up here and ask him a question.
Okay.
So we're still not letting you off the hook.
I know. I think I know what she's going to ask. I failed to follow up on something. So.
I just have, and it was the director before you, and Mr. Sermons. I asked because is there a way we can find out? Because me personally, I have a bear-proof garbage can. I walked out this morning, it was tipped over. I didn't hear the bear come, but again, I agree with you. We could get bear-proof garbage cans, we can get bear-proof dumpsters. We're still going to have an issue. That being said, my thing is all these rural, the urban and metropolitan areas such as Orlando, down south, are they relocating our bears to our area, basically inundating us with more bears? Because the reason why I say that is there was a tag in a bear that was trapped. They tracked the number from the tag, and it came from the Orange County area, which is Orlando. So how does a bear get from Orlando to our area? He doesn't migrate, right? Was he
I'm going to let Dave back.
relocated?
We do not do that. That has
Okay.
not been employed in several years, almost a decade, I believe, if I'm not correct. Again, I don't know the circumstances. If I can have some more information or a contact, I'm happy to look into that issue. But again, we don't take bears from Apalachicola area and move them to Orlando or vice versa. It's not good for the population, and it's not good for the management of the animal.
Okay. I was just wondering because it happened.
And I
Is there a
don't
way
doubt
you
that.
can find out, like, with all the bears that are tagged? Is there a way? Because again, you can take a bear, trap it, and I know how you guys feel about trapping too. Take it to, say, the forest, because let's face it, we have state forest. But is there a way that they get tagged, they get relocated to the forest, but then they migrate back down to our residential areas and neighborhoods? Is there a way that you have a database or some way that we could find out what bear tag came from what? And I'm not trying to say that's gonna fix the problem, but if we're getting, and I know you said that that's not happening, but these bears are getting from down south to our area, and I think that's adding to our population. Again, I know we've talked about hunts, we've talked about all these scenarios, but you know, me personally, I don't want to have to freeze my scrapped food with my good food in my freezer to prevent a bear getting into my garbage can. I'm sorry, I'm just not going to do that. And nothing against any biologists here. Love biologists. I agree, you guys have a good job, but if they were to maybe get called instead of the Franklin County Sheriff's Office dispatch or y'all's dispatch with any and every time a bear encounter happened in our area, then maybe something would happen. I mean, I don't know. I think that it's just, you know, it's a situation that we need to kind of fix, but it's a hard situation to fix when you have all these scenarios that play out by hand. And we talked about mandatory garbage pickup. I think that'll help, but I don't think it's the solution personally.
It's part of the solution. It's not the silver bullet. I would agree with that.
And I agree, there's bears everywhere. Like you said, there's down south, there's even out of state, it's an issue everywhere.
Correct.
So, I don't know. But I appreciate you guys being here today and giving us an update.
Well, just to add on to that, I mean, again, this is an ongoing conversation. Again, bears aren't going away, and we want to hear the concerns of the community. Our executive director, Roger Young, met with the sheriff last week. I was there as well. He's taking those concerns back to evaluate, and we will take those back to the commissioner. Again, the commission ultimately decides on how we use the management tools that we employ. Again, we can only use the tools that we have that are allowed. But again, going forward, we want, just like with the oysters, we want local stakeholders' input. You know, again, how do we manage this issue going forward? And again, talking about the garbage, Chairman, you referenced it before. I think David can speak on it a little bit. There are opportunities there, and we do want to work with the county. I mean, we think that's an exciting part of the solution if we can work with you to help you get the funding you need to help with those cans. That won't solve it. It's not the silver bullet. Again, if you had every can in the community with straps on it, you'd still have bears, we'd still have conflict issues, and we'd still have to catch and relocate or, you know, other issues that, you know, that require a higher level of response for the bears. Right. But again, I'll let David speak to that if y'all want to talk about that right now. You know, you want to talk about the grant opportunities, David?
Yeah, so my name's Dave Telesco. I was the Bear Management Program Coordinator for 14 years. I'm now a section leader, and I've been in front of this commission several times. What I will say is, while, you know, waste management is not a silver bullet, we've seen multiple studies. You're talking about the interactions between people and bears drop from 55 to 95% when trash is secure. You're still going to see bears, but the conflicts of bears changes. And, you know, we saw that when Wakulla went to fully to requiring it. And so I think the other thing too is I've talked to both of the waste service providers in this county, and they both offer bears in cans. And they're not on back order, which was the thing for however many years they tried to set. They're not on back order. And so where we're at with cans and cost share, what you mentioned, Chairman, is that the idea behind the cost share is you get a grant and then you sell the can to the resident. So say a can costs $250, $300, you sell it to the resident for $40. And then that $40 goes back into a fund to buy more cans, so it just keeps cycling forward. We, as FWC, have not had money since 2019 to do that, but Seminole County put forth on their own to the legislative budget request asking, and it went through the Senate and the House. It just got vetoed by the governor in 2020. So it's certainly, and I think they asked for $300,000 and they got approved for $180,000, and it made, like I said, it made it through both houses. So I think it's a very reasonable thing. It's clearly needed, and like I said, the good news is both your waste service providers provide the bears and cans now, and they're willing to allow people to modify their cans. And so the funds that we provided, I think it's 14,000 kits that we've had out, over 200 cans. I just brought down another 100 kits with me from Tallahassee. So we are doing the best we can. We're communicating frequently with the sheriff's office. And I think what John mentioned is really important, is that he gets calls that we don't, and we get calls that he doesn't. And so by coordinating better, we're hearing a fuller picture of what's happening. Otherwise, it's Swiss cheese. We don't really know what's happening. But, you know, Cheryl Spencer is here. She's in charge of this whole area, and she's running down these things. And, you know, if it's a situation where it's a safety risk, we kill the bear. There's no relocation of bears that are posing a safety risk. But if it's not, you know, the number one thing we can do is keep it secure. And I know that the whole freezing it, some people do that. We don't recommend it. It's a lot to ask, and I don't think that's appropriate to ask people to do Herculean things to avoid problems with bears. But certainly, it seems counterintuitive. But if you control the garbage, we had one study, 66% of the interaction dropped just controlling the garbage. 91% property damage dropped. 50% pet food. So literally there's food out there, but because of the main anchor of garbage is secure, they're not even hitting the pet food. So I think it really is, the key is that. But either way, if there's an issue that comes up, if we know about it and we can respond, that's the important thing. And so we do encourage people to call us, let us know what's going on.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question. So I actually was told personally by a biologist, I don't know who it was, but to freeze my scraps and put them out on trash day before. This was a couple years back, so it has been said to me personally.
Understand.
But that too, you know, we have a lot of residents that are on a fixed income. I personally, you know, I pay for my there's an extra fee.
Yes.
For a bear-proof garbage can. We have a lot of people in our community that may live on a fixed income and can't afford that added charge. But you said that the FWC, you guys can't get grants or anything to help facilitate paying for bear-proof. You said you got the kits. The kit consists of, what is it, like a latching system of some kind?
Yes.
And is that?
Yeah, and so we put latches on a normal can, and then you just unlatch it before morning of service. That means 6 days a week it's secure. If you start reducing it at the point where they're lazy. So if they keep coming and most of the time it's secure, and even if not everybody, but most of the community's doing it, it's not worth it for them to spend all that effort. They just as soon as skip it. So latches are free. Again, we provide them for free. The Barriston cans are an extra fee. But I said we don't have money now. It doesn't mean that we can't ask for grants and do that. And one of the first grants we did was in Franklin County. You guys had the first large-scale distribution of Barriston cans. And what we did was we paid that $6 extra a month for 6 months. Most people kept it. The next time we tried it, most people turned them back. And it's because where those cans went was on the coast, where people can afford it. And you're right, it makes a difference. And so I've been trying to work with the waste haulers to get them to understand you got to offer it at a reasonable price, otherwise people aren't going to use them. But we can and we will be asking for funds, and we just need to figure out how to work with you guys to have that kind of hand in glove with, if you do go with mandatory pickup, how can we help ease that transition so it's a little easier? And I will say this, y'all have heard, oh, this bear broke into my bear-proof can. We don't use the word bear-proof because there isn't anything bear-proof, but there is bear-resistant. The cans that are on the landscape, if they fail, that's the company's fault, and we will put the bear down. If bears get into a commercially made Barriston can, we don't need evolved bears. We don't need them to be extra smart figuring that kind of stuff out.
And Mr. Chairman, one more thing. You mentioned the word safety issue with the bears, if it's a safety issue. What do you guys, what's your definition of a safety issue? Is it, you know, going on a porch? Is it flipping over? It's not flipping over a can, obviously that's going to happen, but can you kind of elaborate on that term?
So the bear's behavior we know what a wild bear is supposed to act like. And we know what we call food conditioned and habituated. So food conditioned, every time it's garbage night, they come into the neighborhood. If you combine that with habituated, which means you can't scare it off, that bear can't be on the landscape anymore. Attempted home entry or home entry, that's safety risk clearly, and we put those bears down. You know, you cannot scare it off. And I'm not talking about inside your house, kind of, get out of here, bear. Like you're aggressively trying to scare it off and it won't scare off. That's a safety risk. Black bears, as big and mean as they are, wild black bear, a house cat will tree it. So you should be able to scare them off. You know, the issue is when we hear calls, if it's if it's telling us that I saw a bear walk across the street, but, you know, there's nothing much to do. You know, I saw a bear getting in my garbage can, we can come out, we can strap that can. But if we hear something that is like, and when we go, we don't just like do one thing. We talk to neighbors to find out, is there more to it? And if we hear something that's you know, scaring for us, we will absolutely catch and put that animal down. And I'll just let you know, so across the state, 4% of our calls result in trapping. In Franklin County, 9% of calls result in trapping. So we do double trapping here than we do in other parts of the state. But the reason is because you guys have more home entry or attempted home entry, and you have more public safety issue. So we are responding based on what's going on.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing. Michael, I know you put on our website about what to do.
The conflict room.
Do we have something where people can call to get this latching system?
I mean, you can contact us, and you know what we're basically doing is when people call, we bring it, and we're putting them out there. So yeah.
Get Mr. Telesco's contact information and add it to that.
If
link
you will,
on the
because
website.
that way people can go to our website instead of having to navigate the FWC
Sure.
website. That way they can call this number, and if they don't have a bear-proof garbage can or the latching system, then that's one way we can help in the interim till we figure all this out.
Yeah.
To get that latching system. And it's free, it's no cost to them. Do you guys come out and put it on, or is it?
We can put it on, or we can just give it to the resident, they can put it on, so that's fine. We have a video on how to do it. Mr. Marone, bear management at myfwc.com. That's because then several of us will be able to monitor that and keep up with it better than if it's just one person.
Okay.
But yeah, right now, that's what we're doing, but I am encouraged that both waste companies are aware and willing to work with the residents on it.
Mr. Chairman, before I forget, I want to, so, Mr. Telesco, I'm hearing a little bit that you are saying that the other county went to the legislature and they got money?
They tried to get money.
So they were not successful?
They went through the House and the Senate, and then it got vetoed by the governor. So what I'm saying is it went through the process successfully. They just didn't get the money. Now, that's on their own. That's without us. They have gotten money, just as Franklin County has, from FWC, but that was between 2007 and 2019. We haven't been getting grants since then.
I'm saying you have Tracy coming up later on today. Maybe you might want to add that to your list and then add that to the list that we give Mr. LaFace as we go on. We have a discussion about legislative appropriations later today.
Understand.
So when you said that, it just triggered, well, let's put it on the list and ask for it and see what happens.
Yeah.
You know, it would helpful if we got a letter of some kind of
We could
support or
absolutely,
encouragement from
yes.
FWC to go along
Absolutely.
with our package.
Yeah.
Well, now I have had conversation on behalf of this board, as its chairman, with our legislative delegation one-on-one about this issue, about seeking funding from the state for bear-resistant cane.
Okay.
So we've already had that conversation.
So I think
And
Tracy
they-
was
I
watching,
mean,
so maybe.
Of course, they can't promise anything, but they were like, yeah, I mean, that's, we see the need.
Well, Tracy's watching, so
Yep.
she can start taking notes from now
Yeah.
when we get to
And
her.
as I mentioned, the stats for you guys are elevated. I mean, so this is not like normally across the state. You guys have elevated issues because you're right on top of habitat. So I feel like it's a pretty good fit to say, look, this is a need, you know, can you help us out? And again, we're gonna do whatever we can, and we have sources that we can ask for it. They're not as big as they used to be, but we do have granting that we can try to do.
Yeah. Well, it's, tell you how the people say. The people say, we've already given up 90% of our property, we gotta live somewhere.
Mhm.
That's the problem that people are having. And individuals, the residents that live in our communities are like, when is enough enough? You know what I mean? It's not like, I mean, we are a fiscally constrained county, but part of that is the fact that we'll never be a big county. The state owns 90%, almost 90% of our property between state and federal. So there's plenty of room for bears to live. That's the other thing that you hear. If you just ask people, they'll tell you, there's plenty of room. What I would like to ask, though, is some of the questions that Commissioner Ward was asking, are those consistent with considering a bear to be a nuisance bear? Because I perceive and understand that you guys actually have, FWC has a policy about nuisance bears.
we do have a policy, and the policy just kind of walks through what I just said, which is
Yes.
there's certain things that if they do, that's a signal to us that that's a bear that's a safety risk that we will remove. And like I said, I think, I don't remember the stats off my head, but I mean, we put down anywhere from half to a third of the bears we catch. The rest we get released. We are looking into releasing them somewhere else. But as you talked about, we don't move a bear from Orange County up here. So if we catch a bear, mud, swamp, wilderness areas where we normally put them. But unfortunately, that's fairly close. And so we're looking at other options because we try to keep them in the same population. Otherwise, you're crossing different parasites, different everything. We try not to mix populations like that. So we're looking at other options so that they're not getting released close, which less chance of them finding their way back.
Well, let's just tell a story about Mud Swamp, because I know exactly what you're talking about. I had a friend of mine lived there in Carabel, and he getting in the bear was getting in the freezer and everything, so they finally located him in Mud Swamp. Took that bear 3 days to get back in there and get into his house then. So that's when they're a nuisance, is when they're doing that. But another thing people need to remember too, though, bears migrate just like everything else migrates. And in this time of the year, you're going to see a little bit more migration toward the coast.
Yep.
And I'll tell you the reason why. These bears down here in Florida are like the bears down up north in the Great West out there.
Mm-hmm.
They migrate when the mullet migrate, and they're after the mullet because that's their staple for the winter to eat. So you need to listen to that. Yeah.
And we'll have some years that they all come to the coast to get the coastal oaks. Even if we weren't here,
Yeah, and
they would
that's
come down and
true.
get the coastal oaks. Other times they go to the rivers and they get the black gum. So I mean, they move to where the food is, and that's unfortunately, the food in the neighborhood is way easier and more calories than the food in the woods. We don't have a shortage of food in the woods. It's easier to get food from us.
Well, the other thing is, just to kind of wrap it up, none of us can go backwards. We don't live our life backwards. But going forward, any and every tool at your disposal, whether it be your nuisance bear policy or any of the other things we're discussing here this morning, in conjunction with or partnering together for things, we need to do our best to make it happen, and we're looking for you to do the same.
Absolutely. It's cooperative. That's the only way it'll work.
All right. Any more discussion, commissioners?
Just one quick, now, as far as a nuisance bear, how do you actually judge what a nuisance bear, just to clear that, I mean, can you give us a
Yeah, I mean,
general-
we literally, we have tier 1 to tier 6. Tier 6 is it touched somebody. Whether they hurt them or not, doesn't matter. That's death. But no bear, I don't care if it bumped any by accident, we put the bear down. Tier 1 is I saw a bear in the woods. So it goes anywhere on that scope. But like I said, if it's behaving like a safety risk, if it's trying to get in your house, if you cannot scare it off, that's not safe, and that's what we try to put a trap out for. But what we're hearing a bunch of different things, and sometimes there's a bear in my yard, and okay, and then we go to the yard and there's bird feeders and there's corn, and it's like, well, that's why the bear's in the yard. And so, what's a nuisance is dependent on the person. I mean, some people like seeing them in there to the point of detriment where they're putting corn out, and we don't want them to do that because it affects everybody. So, we're following up on a lot of these calls, and a lot of the calls there's something we could do to make it not as attractive.
Well, I mean, it could cut down tremendously on the calls. If somebody, sees a bear, they won't just run and call them. But if the bear's coming up onto their porch, that's why I'm trying to establish
Understand.
what the guidelines, because honestly, I feel like I'm back in the Middle East with our rules of engagement over here. We had to get shot at 4 times, dodge one more bullet before we could do anything. And it feels like that's what the state's doing with the bears, I mean, we had a girl mauled in East Point, a little girl, some years back.
I'm fully aware of that.
There's sow and cub issues. I mean, if you have a repetitive bear that's coming up into your garage, because I have videos where they're in the garage crawling on top of cars, looking for food.
Mm-hmm.
If someone walks out there and that bear's pent in the garage and they're in between the garage door opening and that bear, chances are it's not going to turn out very well.
And that's
now,
when
there's been calls, and this is why I'm asking, with this particular resident that's called 2 or 3 times, the bear has been inside the garage. you know, the fourth time she walks out there, something happens to her, who's responsible for that?
If the bear gets in the garage while somebody's standing there, we catch it and we put it down. If
Well,
the
while
bear-
they're
if-
standing
if-
there, yeah,
if
but
the
what
g-
I'm saying is that they've been in that garage 4 times up to the point that when they were standing there, then that person gets hurt. How do you answer to that?
If
Because
the-
I've got a video I'll give you,
If
and
the-
we can
if-
probably
if-
put that bear down right now.
So what I'm gonna suggest here is if food is out and accessible for a bear, they're gonna come get it. So if the garage door is open and there's a big bin of food and that bear goes to that food, that's the issue that we wanna correct. If the bear goes in the garage, there's nothing to eat. There's no reason for them to be in there. So we're trying to differentiate between a bunch of bears on a landscape and the bears that are gonna show some sort of behavior that's gonna be a risk. Now you say, I've seen bears 4 times. The vast majority of bears are not going to do anything to anyone. That they are, like I said, a house cat can treat them. The situations that happen that someone gets hurt is usually like there's something attracting, the person doesn't know it's there. It is extremely rare. That's why we try to remove bears that are showing some sort of behavior. But bears are just walking around in town, that's not showing a behavior that is a risk to public safety. I mean, it's difficult because people don't like seeing bears, and I understand that. But the animal is just walking around. That's not something that, just by walking around, that's showing us that that's a bear that may or may not, hurt somebody.
Well, see, I think that's where the communication gap is. They're not just walking, well, they are just walking. They're walking around on their back porches. They're walking around through our garages. They're climbing up, sitting on vehicles. I mean, this isn't a bear out having a little leisurely stroll through the yard. I mean, like I said, I've got videos from Ring phones or doorbells or whatnot that's showing exactly what I'm trying to elaborate on here. And it's inevitable we're going to have another issue before long. And you go to reiterate what Commissioner Jones said, we've got 90% of our property in Franklin County is dedicated to their natural habitat. But the problem is on this border right here, all of our property butts up to some type of natural habitat within a given distance. It's not enough distance to equate to anything, so to speak.
Right. So I guess what you just said is exactly my point. You're gonna see bears. I can't.
I just think that y'all need to step it up on taking some bears out around the residential area.
And
I
as soon
know
as
we
we
have a
do-
lot of people that are environmentally, conscious about habitat and wildlife and all that, and I am too. I mean, I think we all are to a certain extent, but I would personally like to see some of these bears taken care of, because if you don't take care of them, and even if you store your food, they've created a habit. They've created a pattern, just like any other wildlife does, just like their natural pattern to come in. Food sources are falling out, especially this time of year, into the forest, so they're going to migrate closer to where they can get some food. But I mean, if you take the food away right now, that's not going to stop the bears that's already into a habit of coming into our homes, in our environment. And when I say our environment, I'm talking about on my back porch or this person's garage. I mean, those bears need to be taken in conjunction with possibly us trying to get a handle on this garbage issue. I don't think one way or the other is going to solve it. It's going to be a good collective
Agreed.
effort of both. We need some bears to be, I don't know what the term, I mean, I'm not politically correct. We need some bears shot, and we need some garbage cans locked.
Agreed. I totally agree with you. And again, what I'll say is, right now we can remove every bear that's in the neighborhood, and then within a month, they'll get backfilled by other bears because there's food. So we got to do both. If a bear is acting inappropriately, we're going to kill it. If a bear is just there, but you've secured your stuff, we'll move it. But if we do not control the food, they will always be here, always. There's nothing we can do.
But I don't think a garbage can is going to stop the scent from getting out either. I mean, because that's another
But if they're
problem.
not getting they're lazy. If they don't get rewarded, they're not going to keep coming. And unfortunately, what happens right now is it's really spotty. So like one person has a bear's can, but the neighbor doesn't. So they'll just take the neighbor's trash and go eat it, and the other person. So it's not because it's spotty. there's always something else the bear can do, and he's still in the neighborhood. If we had, everyone has cans, and we could strap them, or some of them have bears and cans, now all of a sudden it's just not worth it. And again, you're gonna see them, but it's the prevalent, how often they're in the neighborhood is what increases the issues. So if we can lock down the food, you're gonna see a lot less bears, a lot less frequently.
I think just it's comparing apples to oranges with this state. I mean, like we've said before, we have so much habitat in Franklin County. Now, I don't care what they do in Dade County or what they do down there, because they don't have enough. I mean, they might have 2 bears. We got 5,000, 4,000, whatever. Is that the state population?
That's just here.
I was about to say, there's a number, I still think that's a little
Well,
screwy
that's
there.
2015,
Yeah.
so.
But I mean, you know, you get all these folks that come in and they protest about this or protest about that. I tell you what, if y'all gonna trap and relocate, I tell you, y'all trap them, relocate them, send them down there. Let them live with it for a little while and see if their tone changes or whatnot. But I don't know what the fix is. I'm frustrated because I'm getting phone calls, I'm getting videos from people. And to me, I think that's an encroachment into our world, and I don't want to see anybody get hurt.
We don't either.
And I know you don't. I'm not insinuating that, but I just feel like it's a one-sided approach. It's garbage, garbage, garbage. I think it's a collective approach. Y'all need to eradicate some of the bears that's already decided this is where I'm gonna live right here. Because like I said, and you even said it, they're lazy.
Yeah.
You think they're gonna walk back out there if they don't find some food and they're smelling it here? I mean, I hunt. I mean, I'm in the wildlife quite a bit at times. Not anymore since I took this job, but you know, I just don't see them leaving. I mean, I've had leases. I've had bears come in, and I mean, some of these guys would have been great in the circus. They can climb a tightrope to get to that feeder. We've tried ways of doing everything to keep them out of it. They're the ones I know is not that lazy. They just might be a little more hungry.
And like I said, I think the issue that I would suggest is if you speak with Seminole County, we just presented to them last week. They had like a 90% reduction because they secured their trash. It's since it's not happened here, I understand why you don't believe it, but if you get most people securing their stuff, you're going to see a dramatic difference. I'm not preaching it because I think it might work. I know it will work. It doesn't mean that we're not going to catch bears. It doesn't mean we're not going to kill bears, but it does make a difference. It is the reason.
Seminole went to garbage or bear-proof, like.
Not all of them. They just have an ordinance that says you need to keep trash secure. However you keep it secure. You keep it in your garage until the morning pickup, or you have a bears in can. However you want to secure it is how they did it. They used to be the top county for the most conflicts. Now they're number 6. So I mean, it works. It works in Florida. We've seen it work.
I don't know many garages on these houses down here.
Mr. Chairman, I just shared screen so that in reference to Commissioner Ward's, would like me to add to this. Here's the link. Here's the county website, of course, franklincountyflorida.com, and here is the conflict link, policies and guidelines. And I'll add the message there where you see, click on document below, and here's the actual FWC document. And that's, all this is for the public's knowledge and access to this.
So I mean, that'll answer your specific questions, like when do you kill or put a bear down? When do you trap a bear? All that's in there. And actually, I think that one, I need to send you an updated one. That's 2016. We have a 2021. I'll send you.
And I'll replace this one.
Yeah, we probably got how many more bears since 2016 in the area? A lot, probably.
So, sir, the last time you were here, it was, I guess, about 14 months ago?
Yep, July 2022.
Yep, 15 months ago. We were discussing at that time some of the population numbers of the bears. At the time, I thought that was a statewide thing, but that's actually a Franklin County number?
So, okay, so we did a population estimate of the whole entire state. The whole entire state is 4,000, so I misspoke. In 2015, we estimated 1,000 in this 11 county area, but that population is growing at 12%.
Okay.
That's our estimate.
So the estimated by 2030 was 12,000, but that wasn't just in this county.
That's correct. So right now, we estimate that the 11 county area is probably 2,400.
Okay. I just wanted to clear up a misunderstanding. I went back and looked at the video. You
Yeah.
know, we have videos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Looked at the video from that meeting, and I had thought, wrongfully, apparently, that the number you were giving us was 12,000 in this county. And
No.
that's when I was like, buddy, we got a problem.
Yeah.
We don't have but 12,000 people.
Right.
You know, if you have a bear per person, you know, you're gonna have some issues.
Yeah, that's an
all right.
issue. That's right.
So,
Yes, sir.
anyway, I just wanted to clarify that
Yes, sir.
while you were here.
Yes, sir.
I got another question, I guess a biological question, but what does the state deem to be a healthy population for the bears?
It depends. I mean, you guys have better habitat than most. Like just a couple counties over, the bears in Eglin have horrible habitat. They can't support many bears at all. You guys have really good habitat, so you can support more bears. But what we're seeing is they're coming out of the protected areas where they kind of shrank to when there was very few bears, and they're expanding out. We think the most bears that we had was, 11,000 bears across the state, like before settlement. So we're at 4,000. The estimate is potentially we're at 7,000 now. We don't have okay, now we're full. Okay, we do have where were we before settlement, where are we now? So that gives you a perspective as far as there's not an unlimited amount.
Mr. Chairman, I got a quick question. What's the difference between regulating the alligator population versus the bear population?
It's following the same path. So the alligators used to be endangered, then they're threatened, then they were managed, and now we have 1.3 million alligators.
But there's a season on them where I think it's August, people
Correct.
go out and get tags to kill alligators to control the population.
Because there's 1.3 million of them.
Well-
4,000 bears, that's a big difference. That's why. Yeah.
That's
And they're farmed.
4,000 in
and
Franklin
there's-
County.
I'm sorry?
You said 4,000 bears?
I was wrong. 4,000 is the state.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, you guys, I don't know how
I think
y'all.
there's like at least 1,000
I
of
don't
those
know
in
how y'all
Franklin
doing
County.
that count, but.
Yeah, I mean,
You better take your shoes off and use
but
your
actually,
toes, 'cause, that.
actually, Commissioner, I think what you said about your hunting lease is exactly why you think there's more. Because you got food.
No, I haven't been on that
So
hunting lease in a very long time.
what I'm
Y'all bought
suggesting
it,
is when there's
actually.
food, you're concentrating them, but if they're actually just out in the woods, there's a lot fewer. So they're coming, you're gonna see more in town because there's richer food source. What we do is we go out and put barbed wire out, they scoot underneath that barbed wire, we get their DNA, and we go all over the place. And that's how we estimate the population. If we just sat by a feeder, we would think there's tons more bears, but that's not how we do it.
I got another question since we're on the tag system or whatever with the alligator hunts. Back whenever we actually had the bear hunt, how many initial tags was allocated for that?
Over 3,000 statewide.
So there was 3,000 tags that was issued?
And 304 bears were killed.
All right, just out of curiosity, why did it, if you got 3,000 tags issued, was it gonna meet a certain percentage of the tags issued and shut it down? Because it only lasted like a day and a half.
It lasted 2 days because because they
Was
brought
You
in.
sure it was a full 48 hours? Because I think it should cut off at noon that day.
It-
Because I was like, wow, we don't have a bear problem, but they just filled the quota in a day and a half. We were like,
Yes.
that's
so,
a hell of a
um,
season right there.
Yeah, so, and the idea was that we wanted full control. We hadn't hunted since the early 90s, so we wanted full control. So 2 of the 4 management units, this is one of them, closed that first day. And they were actually, if they had harvested a bear, say in the evening, they were allowed to bring it in the next day because they didn't get it. But no, this unit was closed on the first day, and then the other 2 units were closed on the second day.
Okay, so that was a statewide?
Statewide.
Okay.
There's 7 units, 4 were open for hunting.
And we closed first? Is
Yeah,
that-
you guys closed first. Yeah, I mean, basically,
That's not a shock at all.
it's instantaneous, yeah. Yeah.
Well, another thing, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, just to add to it, the other nuisance that we've got in here besides gators and bears, like Aldous was talking about, is the wild hogs.
Yeah.
Y'all gonna have to do something about that. Those things are terrible. I saw one cross the highway the other day that was about up to the Ford pickup truck hood.
If you see them from behind, it looks like a bear. I mean, they're huge. Yeah, they can get really big, absolutely. And it's
And
a
they're
problem,
dangerous.
it's a problem not just for people. They root up the ground. I mean, we are doing everything we can. They are really bad news.
And I live in the middle of Tatesville. I don't have any problem with bears, but I got problem with hogs.
Understood. Absolutely.
Did you, got a bear-proof, a hog-proof can?
No, all he does is root up my ground.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's either between the hogs or the armadillos, to get me started on that. And I wonder how they get up where they go so far.
All right, any other questions or concerns, Commissioners?
Now we could spend all day.
Yeah, we could.
Sounds like we'll be in touch about
Thank
some
you
of
for
this
being
stuff.
here,
Yeah.
though, Mr.
Yeah.
Travisano.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate you answering my questions.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kramer? Go ahead, Commissioner. Said you had a question.
I did. I'll call him.
Oh, I thought you were saying
I'll
you had a
call
question
him.
to ask. Okay.
You know my question. He knows my
Could
question.
we move Dr. Brooke up? That way John's still here, in case we need to.
We can, but first, let's take a
Okay.
5-minute recess, and then we'll do
Well,
it.
and when we come back, we probably need to do the public hearings, then go back to your presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
survivability. If some court says that part of the ordinance is in for some reason, then it will be strict. The effective date of the ordinance is that it would take effect as provided by law, and all that really means is if this board adopts the ordinance, it's not effective until it's actually filed with the Secretary of State. One question I did have, and I'll look for some guidance from Commissioner Sanders, as we have done in other areas, the maximum speed limit on public roads for golf carts is 30 miles an hour or less. So are there any of the streets that I've described, Commissioner Sanders, that are above 30 miles an hour in this area that the board would need to reduce down to 30 miles an hour? If so, if you adopt this ordinance, then the second thing to do is adopt a resolution reducing the speed limit on any of the public roads that are exceed 35 miles an hour. And as we've done with other ordinances, I do know from talking with Commissioner Sanders, there are some roads that are less than 30 miles an hour, and those would remain at their current posted speed limits. And if the board has no questions for me, the next appropriate step would be to receive public comment.
I do have a question. I know that it simply lays out what a golf cart is.
Yes, sir.
So by having that definition and only that definition, it should be excluding, of course, you probably won't run into this much in Lanark as you do in my district, but it should be excluding side-by-sides and UTVs that all the manufacturer's websites say are off-road use only.
That is correct.
Okay, what does it do, though, to address specifically what we're dealing with in my district that we got scheduled for a workshop next month, with the legislature passing and making a rule that there is now the low-speed vehicle that does not fall under any of this ordinance because they have a tag, they can go and be anywhere. I guess with the speed limit being appropriate, it might cover it, but I just wanted to make sure we're addressing it as we're speaking of it this morning.
Yes, sir. And I am aware only because you had mentioned to me that the legislature has modified the speed limit qualifications for slow speed vehicles, so you may can speak better to that than I can. But the last time I looked, a slow speed vehicle is licensed, it's tagged, it's insured, and it can operate on any road that does not exceed the posted speed limit of 35. I think the modification you had mentioned is that if they're on a section of road that's posted at a speed limit higher than 35, then if they're only on it for like, I don't know, a half mile,
Mile and a half.
whatever, mile and a half,
Mhm.
wow, then it's legal.
And that's 45, which is what Highway 98 is, but I could be wrong, but I think according to that law, county governments, municipalities can still make sure that they designate, and we're doing it today because we're making an ordinance, that even if they have a low-speed vehicle, they still can't be on Highway 98 for health and safety reasons.
Yeah, at 45 miles an hour, that seems extremely dangerous to me, whether it's a
Well,
mile
that's the
and
way
a
it's
half
written.
or 10 feet.
Right. Well, that's the way the state legislature has it written up.
Okay.
Even if everything we're doing is under 35 miles an hour, and they get on to, because this says define that golf carts can't do it, but it's not saying that low-speed vehicles can't do it. I'm just trying to address both at the same time. I'm trying to hinder nothing. I'm not trying to leave any gaps, because if we pass this today and we don't do anything about low-speed vehicles or designate that they definitely cannot be on Highway 98, it's 45 through there. They can be on Highway 98.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
that's,
we're not,
because we don't have the ability to enforce if they've been on the road for a half mile or a mile and a half. That's not gonna happen.
we're gonna have somebody on every corner. I mean, that's
So
impossible.
I just wanted to bring it up, again, not trying to hinder anything, trying to make sure we don't leave any gaps on what we're discussing. That's all.
When a low-speed vehicle will be tagged, that's
Yes,
correct?
yes. But we still, as a board, when we're creating ordinances, can say there's still a road they can't be on, or roads. We just can't outlaw all of them. You know, you can't, by effect of your ordinance, say, no, you can't have them on our roads. But you can designate that certain roads are hazardous to the public for them to be on that road, so you're not gonna allow it as a state, as a county government. So, just wanted to bring it up.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments for Attorney Schuler before we open this to public comment?
Just one thing, point of clarification, Mr. Schuler.
Yes, ma'am.
The Ho-Hum Trailer Park is on the south side, but it is around the Alabama Street area, but it's on the south side.
Yes,
Because
ma'am,
we
that-
have
that
those
is
street ends that goes to the water down there. So it's, Ho-Hum's between Alabama and Arkansas out there, so.
And I put that in there, and it can be stripped out if the board finds it to be confusing, but I think most people, like myself, coming into Lanark Village, I have a good visual image of where Ho-Hum is. I would have to look for the street sign to find Alabama.
That's
so-
right, that's right.
And then the Putnell Station is iconic, and everybody knows where the Putnell Station is on the east side
Oh,
of
yeah.
Lanark.
everybody
So
knows it.
I
And
was
the,
just-
the only street, the only road that will have to change any, speed limit zone is Oak Street. There's a portion of it that is 35 miles an hour, but that's the only one. So, road department can get that taken, care of.
All right. So now are we at a place where we can do public comments, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anyone in the room that wishes to comment publicly about this potential ordinance today? I do have two that filled out speaker cards, and they said they want every item on the agenda. Ms. Sanders and Ms. Spore, do you want your
I don't want to talk
time?
about that, but I think what you're saying about low-speed vehicles
Yes.
needs to be added.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Same here.
Anyone else that wants to actually come and comment on this today? All right. What about online, sir?
If you'd like to comment this and you're attending by Zoom, please indicate that by raising your hand on your device. Again, if anyone would like to comment on this particular ordinance in front of the board. No raised hand, Mr. Chairman.
All right. What's our next procedure, just to the board?
If there is no public comment and the board has no further questions, you're at the point where the board makes a decision either to adopt the ordinance as presented, adopt the ordinance with modifications, or reject the ordinance and not adopt it.
You ready? Not ready? Have any questions on it?
Well, is there any problem with doing the modifications we've discussed to the ordinance? So we could put, and maybe, is there a way to write in there that ho-hum as a point of reference?
I don't believe it. I don't believe
Or
it's
just take it
gonna,
out?
yeah, I don't believe it.
Okay.
Just keep it like that, because I don't believe it's gonna make any difference.
The ordinance should not be confusing in the sense that if someone were to think we're authorizing the use of golf carts on ho-hum, because it very clearly in the ordinance says two things. One, it says that Alabama Street, where the ho-hum RV park is located, and then there's a specific exclusion of Highway 98 and all areas south of Highway 98. But we could delete it out if there's any concern at all that it could be confusing.
Well, the only concern I would have, but it's not no real big hiccup, would be, the folks, when I went out there to Lanark, went out there a couple of months in a row to talk to them about this, and they were concerned that they couldn't ride the golf carts across 98. And I told them it was the reason stated because we were throwing reference to East Point. We were trying to craft it the same way East Point was crafted, about north of 98. I don't believe it's gonna be a problem, so rather than to hold it up or anything, because we've been waiting so long to pass this ordinance, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion to approve this ordinance.
We have a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second. Did you want to include the verbiage about the low-speed vehicles, Mr. Sanders?
Do y'all think we need, Mr.
My
Schuler?
recommendation would be not to, because the legal classification definition of a low-speed vehicle is completely different from a golf cart, and we haven't advertised this public hearing for any regulations on low-speed vehicles, so I would be concerned in that sense.
Yeah, well, we have to, I would think that we might have, as long as the board is good with knowing that we have an ongoing discussion to make, since it wasn't advertised that way.
Yeah.
To wrap it up and to make it complete, I do think we need to address that before it's over with, though.
Yeah.
But I'm fine if that's the pleasure of the board.
Well,
We
I'm
can
fine.
bring it during the workshop.
Yeah.
I mean, we could expand it, the workshop could address any area of the county that you want it to address.
Yeah.
Well, if you'll remember when we did Alligator Point and Ball Point on the golf cart, we said we knew that Florida legislature was changing the rules, and that we somewhere down the line gonna probably have to change our rules also in our ordinances. So let's go ahead and pass this for now, and then we can deal with the low speed when we have the workshop, and then we may have to end up changing all of the ordinances for St. George Island and.
I know it's definitely coming up for St. George Island.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Because it is a problem.
So, yeah. So,
I know we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Did we have a second?
Commissioner.
Ward,
Commissioner
did you
Ward.
second? Yes, we
I
have-
didn't second, I just was asking the question,
thought
but,
you seconded comment.
but I mean, if she's okay with it, it's her district, I'll
I'm
second.
fine with it.
Okay, so we do have a motion by Commissioner Sanders to adopt. We have a second by Commissioner Ward. Any discussion, Commissioners, before we vote? All in favor? All opposed? That's unanimous.
All right, Commissioners, as a follow-on matter regarding the Landmark Village Golf Cart ordinance that you've just adopted, we would need by motion and second the adoption of a resolution by the board to reduce the speed limit on all of Oak Street in Landmark Village, reduce it to 30 miles an hour.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Amison,
Second.
second by Commissioner Sanders. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous.
May I move on to the next public
Yes,
hearing?
please do.
The next two public hearings both involve, in one form or the other, fill, clearing of land, and which all essentially relate to stormwater management issues. I know at the last board meeting, the special meeting that you had, the board was seriously entertaining having a workshop on these matters before proceeding, but the board did also elect to proceed forward with the currently scheduled 11:05 public hearing for St. George Island stormwater and lot clearing ordinance, and also scheduled a possible public hearing on the emergency countywide field ordinance at 11:10. So does the board want to move forward with the public hearings? Do you want to move forward with, table these and then move forward with a workshop? How does the board want to proceed this morning?
Well, I've pushed for this issue on St. George Island. I really have. And I'm glad we got to a day where it's closer to being keyed up. The only thing I will say, and it's not please hear exactly what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. The big concern I have is I want to make sure when we do it right. What we're potentially talking about doing here today is not a golf cart ordinance. It's not a go back and modify it later for low-speed vehicles kind of thing. It's something we've never done before. So when we do it, I want to make sure we do it right. I want to make sure it's going to cover the needs, and it's not going to make lots unbuildable, and it's not going to hinder the process where any homeowner, those of us here in the room today, most of us own the homes, but if there's any other homes we're wanting to build or whatever we're doing, that's not somehow going to make an adverse process. We're still in the process as a county of trying to get to a point where we actually have code enforcement, where it's not, currently it's either handled by the attorney, he's sending a letter. Most recently, Ms. Courtney's trying to handle that on our behalf, and it's a hodgepodge of mix-up. So, and the other concern I have, and I'll be honest with you, it's not about not supporting it. I'm 1,000% ready to vote for this ordinance today on St. George Island. I want you to know that. But I also know that most of the people that work in the industries that build the homes, that do the things they have to do with building the homes, used to work in seafood. And we were talking earlier today about a bay that now they're talking about going even longer with the closure and even more destruction to industry and economy. Because at the end of the day, we have to take care of our environment. We got to make sure we're doing everything open, transparent, and honest. And if I'm honest with you, some of the discussion I've had with the people that are in the industry that are building the homes are saying Most of us don't even know you guys are even talking about this. We do not know. It's come up and you're already ready to make a decision, and we've not had valid input. If I've sought to do anything in my 7 years on this board, it's to be absolutely as transparent as possible. So I personally would like to see us include this in our workshop that we should be able to schedule today, not to delay it, but to make sure we do it right, and we're done. Because again, I'm 100% for it. These are issues that are affecting that barrier island like nothing else in this county that we need to protect. And that's putting field when field should not be placed. That's taking down every tree where there's an acknowledgement that every tree needs to be took down. And some of what we're facing, a lot of the lots that are left are 50-foot wide lots. I don't know about you, but I got to walking around my house trying to see which, I don't think my house would even fit on a 50-foot lot. And it's 1,400 square feet, just because of the way it's laid out. But if somebody was building my house and they had to put it up on pylons, they got to go around it with machinery. So, I mean, there's a lot to make sure we get it right. Again, I am supportive of this. I want to see it passed. I hope the board supports it, because it really needs to happen, but I want to make sure we're doing it right. And I think we need to have more input, not less.
Mr. Chairman, I would tend to agree, and one of the things I spoke to Attorney Schuler about is in this current ordinance as it is currently, even the updated one. For one, the audience, most of our public, just now got the updated with the new verbiage, and I think that's a discredit to them and a disservice to them, because they should have been able to look at this and go over it before our hearing today. But again, the thing also is, in this ordinance, even in the updated version, says nothing about existing driveways. You know, that's something, again, maybe the workshop we need to have, because it doesn't say, it says about fill and what you, in driveways, but it doesn't say anything about, say, if Mr. John Doe wants to, you know, he's got a muddy driveway and it's currently dirt, and he wants to put some kind of substrate on it, such as what's included in this ordinance is oyster shells, lime rock, whatever. Are they gonna have to be going and paying money to get this what's requiring this ordinance, a survey to ensure that it's not gonna flood the neighbor out after they go and put the substrate down? That's my concern. I don't think everything is addressed that needs to be addressed in this ordinance, and that's my personal opinion. I don't, like I said at our workshop that we had, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I don't want to have to come back and revise an ordinance when we could just have a workshop, get everybody's input, get the public that's in support of this ordinance as it currently is, but then in addition to that, get the input for the people that work in the community. I understand that with this ordinance, the way it currently states, also says that in a nutshell, 80% of the property, well, that's pretty much an unbuildable lot, in my opinion. And that's tax base for our county. So there's a lot more things that go into play with this. Me personally, I feel like that we don't have all of our T's crossed and I's dotted, in other words, because again, I don't want to have to come back and reinvent the wheel. I want to get everybody's input. I think a workshop would be the best way to do this, and then come back, get everybody's ideas, get Courtney's. I know Courtney and Angela have put their ideas in as well, but I also want the public's. I want the people that work in the business, everybody's input, put it into an ordinance where it's beneficial to everybody and not a detriment to people, if that makes sense.
I think it's possible. I mean, I do think it's possible. I don't want staff to think that I'm ungrateful or unthankful for the work they had put in. They put in a lot of work. But there's still a couple of things we need to address, because we don't need any unintended consequences. We know what we're dealing with now. We do have to give them away, the staff. We're policies and procedures. So we do have to give them away to address issues that we currently cannot address. So again, I'm not trying to delay this, you know, for a long time. I think we need to go to the workshop, and then once we get the input, advertise for another public hearing, which is what we continue to do for ordinances we pass anyway. Most ordinances are done with 2 public hearings. So, you know what I mean? A lot of them that we've done. So, you know, I'm good with that.
Well,
Yep.
I'm sorry.
No,
Commissioner
you-
Emerson, you're gonna say something?
No.
Sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm snatching staff in there at the last, at the 11th hour or whatnot, trying to wrap my head around this. And we had that emergency meeting last Wednesday. That's not, that meeting was not the back and forth that we should do. And I know you guys have been working on this, and I know I've talked to y'all extensively over the last week, and you're trying to do the right thing. We are too. I just think we need to have that environment to where we can have that back and forth before we do set this down, But I would stress that we need to get it done. I mean, it's not something we need to kick down the road very far at all. But are we going to wrap this all into the unincorporated and the island together?
Well, I still think.
Just
Yeah.
everything outside the island.
Yeah, I think that'll come out in the workshop. I don't think that you have the same issues in the rest of unincorporated Franklin County that you have on St. Louis Island.
No,
I don't
agree
think
with
that
you.
those two ordinances will look anytime, they will resemble each other, but they will not be the same. I don't think.
I just feel that with something like this, we need to have that atmosphere where we can have that back and forth before we jump forward. And I echo what the chairman said. I'm all for it. Something needs to be done, but I don't want to jump in there and do something and then, like Commissioner Ward said, well, we can't go back and fix that. We've just, basically done something that eliminated some possibilities for people and for the government, for all of us. I just think that we need to have a little more discussion on this in a public setting where we can have that back and forth with the public versus doing it in a meeting where we have all these structures and rules and you can't say anything. This meeting here is a mirror image of what we did Wednesday. The chairman did give a little bit of leeway as far as the public having conversation there, but this is not the atmosphere for that. We need to have a workshop on this so we can have that back and forth and then make the call. And again, I appreciate the work y'all are doing. That's just, where I'm at with it. I'm sorry, did you have something?
Nope.
You want me to say something?
If you want to.
I can say a lot. The other day, it was very apparent that nobody knew what we were trying to do. But we did it to where we were trying to keep that 9 foot of fill out of that piece of property. 9 foot of fill was ridiculous. But my thing is this. One of our number one things is to regulate building, zoning, whatever we have to do on the upland, because whatever we do on the upland is going to go out to that bay. It's the same thing with St. George Island. St. George Island has seen tremendous growth. And I've always said, and I'm looking at Miss Barbara when I say it, myself and Mr. Bevan Putnell used to say, people don't realize that St. George Island is a ticking time bomb of Franklin County, and at any time if that goes out and does it, we will never have another bay. So we have to do what is charged to us to do, and that's to take care of the problem. Now, everybody needs to understand too that every lot in Franklin County is not buildable. That's where we need to come from. I've always been there. Every lot in Franklin County is not buildable. But what lots are, it needs to minimize that fill, because I'm going to tell you, I don't want nobody, of course nobody's going to push dirt on me, but I don't want nobody pushing dirt on me or pushing water on me because they put too much dirt in there. But yet at the same time, those folks, a lot of them that had these businesses came out of the oyster industry, got into business to do this because they had to make them a living. So, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. I think we need to have more of I call it a tit for tat, but it's not. In other words, I think we need to hear more from the public before we go set down something in writing. And I'm in complete agreement.
And to Mr. Chairman, I know a lot of people here are today, and sorry to waste your time about this, but some of the ones that are in the business could not be here because we're having a meeting in the middle of the day and they have to make a living, so they can be here, which is, again, a good thing of why we do a workshop. And when we do the workshop, we do it at 5 in the afternoon. That way the working people can come in and give their take as well. So that's, I think, another reason why we should just move forward to a workshop.
Chairman?
Yes.
Okay, with all that said, a few things. We do need to have the workshop. This is one of those months that I consider a lucky month because we have 5 Tuesdays. So if everyone's schedule allows, we can have a 5 o'clock workshop next week, Thursday, on the 26th.
I'm good with that.
Now, our November meeting dates are the 7th, which I think will be too close to have,
Yeah, well,
to have from the workshop, to have allow staff time to make any tweaks to the current ordinance. So I would say the second meeting in November, which is the 21st. And to avoid re-advertising, I think you could do both public hearings,
at the same time.
11:05 on the 21st, today, the attorney is so inclined to allow that, or advises that is to do that. I will say with the workshop, one of the things that's really obvious is that enough of the public and the board and myself, we kind of need to be educated on floodplain management, because, you know, some of the things that came out of the workshop, I was like, ooh, I mean, I'm not embarrassed to say, I stood here and I said, oh, I didn't realize that, you know? For instance, like the one in Lanark Village, you know, we were worried about it, come to find out, because of the flood zone, he can't do it anyway. The federal government won't allow it. Yeah. So, yeah. So, yes. So that would also be helpful at the workshop. It will help the contractors, current residents, and any future homeowners that are listening or participating or here understand that floodplain management is really important in Franklin County. Really important.
It is.
So, yes, so if the attorney looks at the dates and he's good with those, I would recommend a 5 o'clock workshop on this matter on the 26th. Everybody could speak for, against, those who just have other ideas, you know. And then we could have the public hearings on November 21st at 11:05. If everybody's so inclined.
Now excuse me, Mr. Chairman, let's clarify the workshop is consistent of, because there were 2 different hearings today. One was just basically St. George Island. The other was for the rest of the county.
I think it worked out for both.
I think there was a lot of confusion with the public too as to what was what. Because I got calls, I'm like, well, which is it? And I got confused myself. I reached out to them, I was like, which, is it St. George Island or is it for the whole county? Because I do agree that we are gonna have to eventually move for the entire county. I know, I understand the chairman's take that he was trying to get something for St. George Island now because of the growth that's going on there currently. But I do agree that every area of the county is much different than St. George Island. So let's make the workshop for everything, field, stormwater, that way nobody gets confused.
That's right.
Clearing.
Yes.
Yes, all that.
And then it helps your staff to understand the difference between the 2 ordinances that you want, and then they could work with the attorney to get it done in a manner that we walk away from the workshop kind of agreeing the direction we want to go in.
Yeah. Just as a comment, if this is the pleasure of the board and the way we move, whatever we do, I want to make sure whatever ordinance whatever the final document looks like, is available to the public at least a week before that public hearing.
Agreed.
Because everybody needs to be engaged in it. Everybody needs to know what's going on. Again, we're not trying to do it in the corner. Let me further emphasize something I want to make sure the public's aware of, and that I am acutely aware of, because I represent the district. The other issue, the big reason I started pushing, I guess, harder about this is with aha moment with Miss Erin Griffin during her report about 3 months ago. She brought up the fact that we're finally getting to a point where the DOT has given Franklin Boulevard to Franklin County. They are still going to pave it here in the next 2 or 3 years. And we're adding a 3rd stormwater pond, but we're looking at doing a stormwater project with restore funds throughout the 3rd district. It doesn't involve repaving every road, but it does involve repaving most roads, especially those that are deteriorated because they've had water sitting in them. The issue with that is, and this is what really caught my attention and the reason why we're here today, the issue with all that is, it's a snapshot in time. It does not address anything to do with residential stormwater going forward in that district, and there's still a lot of C4 zone properties in that district. That's the reason I was like, hold on, we need to do something about residential stormwater, and that's why we're here today. Because if we don't address it, 10 years after that project's completed, nobody that lives or visits St. George Island will be able to tell that the county did a stormwater plan, because there'll still be stormwater issues. So that's why I say I'm 100% behind this. I'm ready to pass it when we get to the point where we have transparency, buy-in, everybody's at least understanding what we're shooting for and knowing about it. So do we need to make a motion to table, or what do we do? How does that work?
Mr. Morone has suggested that you table to a date, time, and place certain.
Yes.
Which state statute does allow you to do.
Mhm.
However, given the importance, I wanted to get the board's permission to re-advertise one additional time in the newspaper, at least 10 days before that public hearing on the 21st. And that would require, of course, that the ordinances be drafted and on file at the clerk's office and in Mike's office 10 days before the
Okay.
public hearing, which would satisfy the board's direction to have something available in advance. You said a week, but this would give them 10 days.
Okay.
So what you would do is table to a date, time, and place certain. You said November 21st at 11 a.m. and 11:05. I would just say, let's just combine them at 11 o'clock, because I'm not sure which one to tag at 11 and which one to tag at 11:05. I guess we could do it the same way now, just do SGI at 11 and then the countywide for the area other than St. George Island at 11:05. And to authorize me to advertise one additional time. So that's the motion I would recommend that you entertain.
Okay. Pleasure of the board.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve tabling it to November 21st meeting at 11 o'clock and 11:05, with a public workshop to be held in between on the 26th at 5 o'clock about this issue. Do we have a second?
I'll say.
All right, I have a second by Commissioner Amison. Any discussion, commissioners, before we vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. All right.
That concludes the public hearings that are on my report.
Okay. You don't want to take a 5-minute recess?
Yeah, allow the room to clear.
Okay. Franklin County Board of County Commissioners now back in session. At this time, we have, as a board, chosen to do our lunch break from now until 2 o'clock. In recess.